Good evening and welcome. We'll be opening up the meeting of September 6th of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'll start by asking everyone to please silence their cell phones, and I will introduce the board. To my right is Jerry Patamas. He is an associate member of the board. My name is Terrence Hurry. I am chairman of the board. To my left, Kim Beelan will be here momentarily. She is the clerk of the board. We have Paul Murphy, who is a voting member of the board, followed by Bob Dugan, who is an associate member. We also have with us Sri Boudreau, who is the zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided by in the bylaws, which have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's office for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All decisions made by the board are made through the public hearing process. The goal of the board is to hear testimony from the applicants and from the public and to allow a full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, I will ask the clerk to read the public announcement of the hearing and present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and to summarize correspondences to and from the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board if deemed necessary. The board will then ask questions to the applicant, and then the public will be invited to comment if you have any questions, comments, concerns regarding the project. Public comment should be directed only at the project, and I also ask you to please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. These statements can include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or perhaps it can just be a question about the nature of the project. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time if questions become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair. Please come to the podium to the right. Please state your name and address for the record. And in the interest of time, we'll be limiting comments to 2 minutes per person. After that, when the board is satisfied that we've received enough information presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision, by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will close. Alternatively, we may continue the hearing to a future date and time certain if we need more information. And after the hearing is closed, no more testimony can be taken. The board may then further discuss the project among ourselves, and make a motion to either deny or approve will be made and voted upon. Any motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. And an affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approvals of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. Split vote, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and will result in a denial. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different. With all that having been said, we have an open meeting at 6 o'clock. We were going to vote to go into executive session. However, we do not have to do that at this time. We have 1 continuation, 5 new hearings, and we also have items on the open meeting agenda. At this time, I'd be entertaining a motion for us to go out of order and take the open meeting agenda items first. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I will make the motion that we take the agenda, open meeting agenda item out of order.
Second.
Thank you, Jerry. That was made by Jerry and seconded by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
I will ask all those people who come to the podium to please speak up tonight. We do not have a microphone at the podium. The microphone is on the camera. As you can tell, we're going through some changes in this room, so when you go up to the podium, please speak loudly. Thank you.
All right, so first on the open meeting agenda items, we have the minutes of August 16th, 2018. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
And are there any proposed changes?
No.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion then.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of August 6th.
I'll second that.
Motion,
It's 16th, is it not?
I'm sorry, did I say the 16th?
It should be the
I
16th.
think that's, yeah, the 16th.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 16th.
And I'll second that.
All right, motion to approve the minutes of August 16th made by Paul, second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
I will ask the board to hold off on the next item because, excuse me, the attorney is not here, nor is the applicant, to discuss that in case the board has any questions.
Okay, we'll table that for now.
So the only thing you have before you is board updates. If you want to briefly review the 8/28 meeting, and I will ask the board to please send your comments on the meeting that you had and the information that was given to you by Tom Bott, the town planner,
Sure. So,
because we really need that. We're going to have another joint meeting if we can decide on a date. So I ask that you please send your comments or questions. I have received one on one of the articles from a member, so if you could please do that at your earliest convenience so I can either get an answer or get it to the people for discussion at the next joint meeting. Does anybody else have a board update?
I got a question. Are we going to set an agenda item to review all the articles, the zoning articles that are being proposed for town meeting? Or will we just comment and you will forward?
Well, I'm asking you to comment, and that's what the town planner is asking, to comment on the information that you were given and for the discussion that you had on the joint meeting. And then we'll discuss it at the future joint meeting.
Okay, and what about the other zoning articles that you just
Same
said?
thing.
So we'll discuss that at possibly the future joint meeting.
Right. Well,
There's 4 or 5 other.
I didn't put that on the agenda. If
But
you'd
I'm
like
asking
that-
it to consider.
If you'd
not
like
to
it on the
discuss.
September 20th agenda to discuss the articles, it's up to the board. If you'd like to do that, the articles that were just sent to you.
I know I can't make the 20th, but I can send written comments.
Is the board okay with that? September 20th?
That's how it.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that, sir.
I think so.
All right, so to have that on the agenda. Let's see if I can remember that one.
And just so members of the public out there today know, as well as the people tuning in later, I know this is being taped, we had the joint meeting with the planning board on August 28th. The subject of that meeting was the recodification of the zoning bylaws in the town of Falmouth. So there is a contractor working diligently to review and revise the bylaws for the town, and within the next few months, we're hoping to have a number of joint meetings, again with the planning board, to review each section of the bylaws and to revise them and eventually send them to town meeting for approval.
Excuse me, I did just get confused with the articles versus the recodification of the bylaw.
Oh,
I was speaking of the recodification of the bylaw. Get your comments and everything to me on that. I apologize for any confusion. On the articles, just send me your comments and questions, and I will give them to the town planner, and he will respond if he feels he should, or to answer any questions, and I'll get those back to the board as a whole. My apologies for any confusion.
no worries.
And that's it.
All right. Procedural rules and policies, I know Kim's working on that.
Right, we may revisit that tonight if she's prepared.
We might. I'll make the notation. And any future agenda items, anyone? None?
No.
Just the one that Jerry spoke of for April
Right.
20, April, hello.
November 20th.
I'm going.
No.
September. Woo-hoo. So that concludes what we can in the open meeting at this point in time.
All right. So
So it's up to the board how you want to proceed with the public hearings, the continuation of the public hearings.
do we have any ETA or?
She said approximately 6:30. So if you want to make a vote to go back into the public hearings, then you can certainly ask Mr. Borselli if he'd like to go forward on his continuation or wait for the fifth person.
Okay. And we
4
do
is
need-
a quorum.
We do need a vote to go back into,
Yes, you do.
okay, so since we took the open meeting agenda items out of order, I'll entertain a vote to go back into public meeting.
I'll second that.
How about you, Meg?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
I'll make it, you can second.
All right.
All right.
I'll give that to Paul and Jerry, because that's good. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Turning to the continuation for the night, application 46-18 McDermott, 42 Tower House Road. For the applicant, we have Mr. Baselli. As you can see, we have 4 here, and 1 is on the way.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we would prefer to wait until we have a final form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And does the board, I'm sure the board doesn't have an issue with that.
So you want to make a vote to continue that hearing to later in the evening when Ms. Beelan shows up?
Okay. Does it need to be a time certain, or is it just?
No, I don't think so. We can take it when she shows, when we commence another one.
Would anyone like to make that motion?
Make a motion to continue 46- later in the evening.
All right, that was made by Bob. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Wait a minute, 46,
5518.
it's 5518, isn't it?
It's 46, 18.
46-18.
Where?
I don't see it on my schedule of hearing.
It's the continuation.
Oh, sorry, all right.
Yeah.
But can we roll with the others? If.
Yeah, we'll take it whenever we,
Yeah.
Sorry,
After.
It's listed as.
Okay.
I think there was a typo.
Oh, there is a typo on that one, but if you look at your
Yeah.
agenda, I believe it's correct.
We're controlled by the agenda.
Okay, was
So
that,
that was made by Bob and second by you, Jerry?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on, we have the first new hearing of the night. It would be application 59-18, Ido, 48 Shady Lane in East Falmouth, a special permit to allow a home occupation.
and Mr. Chairman, would you designate a clerk until the clerk gets here,
I'm
please?
certainly will. Paul, would you do the honors, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Just for the record, Paul is the clerk on this application.
Okay. Let's see. Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Ellen B. Ito of Hatchville, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-162F, subsection 1 of the Code of Falmouth to allow a home occupation on subject property known as 48 Shady Lane, Hatchville, Mass., map 16, section 3, parcel 20, lot 14.
Referrals,
Referrals, right.
next page over,
Right.
under the first page.
The first page is, what is the first page?
I'll go underneath the first page.
Oh.
There you go.
There you go.
Is this DPW? I can't tell. I never do this.
It is, it's engineering.
Oh, engineering. How'd you know?
Because of the red type, it's
Oh.
standard comments with
Oh,
a
okay.
recommendation.
Yeah, standard comments. This application was reviewed only for impacts to public rights of ways and public utilities. Shady Lane is a private right-of-way in this area. Any connections or alterations to public utilities will require permission from the appropriate town department. The project must not direct any stormwater runoff to public property, but as a rights-of-way. We recommend adding dry wells, rain guard, and other stormwater measures for the new garage roof. Conservation Commission, no comment. Health Department, no comment. Assessors, some sort of a comment that says includes lots 14 and 19. Water, no comment. No comment from the fire department, no comment from the planning office, and that's it. I think that's it.
Yeah, no correspondence.
No correspondence.
And for the applicant, you can come up to the podium.
Okay. My name is Ellen Ito. I live at 48 Shady Lane. I run a lost wax casting business, precious metals lost wax casting business, and I currently rent space, but I'm putting up a new garage, and I would like to relocate my business to my garage on my property. I operate the business myself, I don't have employees, and there are no members of the public who come to my place of business.
And she's shown in the file that her workshop office space will not be more than 30% of the floor area of her dwelling, which is according to the bylaw. She's only before this board for home occupation because of the substandard size lot. Under 240-162F1, I think, it's required to come here for a substandard size lot.
Any questions from the board? Bob, you want to start us off?
On the finished space, is it heated at all in the garage, or how is it finished off?
Well, it's not finished yet, but it will be heated. Radiant floor heat.
And you won't be planning any kind of habitable space in the garage, just
No.
to store for your business? And anything regarding any special deliveries or anything you need for the business, or?
I get UPS deliveries. The UPS guys down the street pretty much every day anyway, so.
That's all there?
So Ellen, what is it that you do? Just curious, I missed that. Casting?
Casting, yes, precious metals lost wax casting.
What does it do? Like, what do you make?
I make either parts for jewelers or also, I also make a lot of parts for musical instruments. Like, it's casting, melting metal and casting small parts.
Oh, cool. Okay, thanks. I'm all set.
All right. Jerry, do you have any questions?
Multi-metal casting.
Yep.
How do you dispose of any solid metal waste or liquid if there's waste from the casting process?
Oh, the metal? Oh, I keep it and I send it back for it because it's valuable. I actually don't dispose.
And there's no rinse water or anything else?
There's some rinse water that I just, it's,
And
none
goes
of
into
the
the septic
metal.
tank? Oh, I'm sorry.
there's no metal that goes into any rinse water. I try and collect
So you cool
metal.
on it or whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. No other question.
You're not anticipating any noise, vibrations, flares, fumes, odors, or electrical interference? I'm just quoting straight from the bylaw.
Okay. No.
All right. Does it for me. Any other questions? Suri, anything?
No, I have nothing.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll ask if any members of the public wish to have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this comment? No? All right. How would the board like to proceed?
Close the hearing? Is that the next?
Chris?
Oh, do we want to discuss it more?
Well, you can either close the hearing or you can discuss it.
Have a brief discussion if you want.
I'm pretty satisfied with it. I don't need the discussion. I think it's a pretty good project.
I think it is as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even really know what it is, but, I mean, it's casting things, but yeah, it sounds reasonable, and, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like it'll have minimal effect on the area, there's no issues with deliveries.
Do you have fire safety equipment there?
Yes, I have a fire extinguisher. And inspector comes every year and certifies it.
Okay, so we'll get that into the record, make that fun. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, the board,
Oh.
you can go ahead and sit down. I believe they're going to close the hearing.
Jerry, would you like to do that?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
Second?
All right. It's made by Jerry and second by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And how would the board like to proceed?
I'd like to make a motion to approve special permit 59-18 as submitted.
I'll second it.
All right. Moving on to findings.
I think it meets the requirements of 240-162.
F.
Significantly meets, there might be, there is no company vehicles, no outside employees. I don't want to go through the,
I'll do that.
okay.
Well, testimony had no employees, no members of the public coming there. She operates it herself.
Correct.
Anything else?
So I'll make a finding that it meets 240-162A through E, and the requirement to come here under F1. Okay?
Sounds good. Since it is
Anything
an
else?
undersized lot. I don't think there's anything else.
Okay. The garage is not before us, just the home occupation.
Right. Conditions?
Conditions
As provided for in the...
for the application.
Per plan, no
Yeah.
habitable space. Make a finding that she is going to have it heated. So the condition is per plan, no habitable space.
Right.
Any changes to the home occupation would come back before this board. How's that?
Perfect.
Sounds good.
That sounds
Do you
good.
have to make any kind of note because she runs two businesses, even though it's one person?
She is leaving the rental space and just doing this at home.
No, what I just mean when she mentioned there's a DBA and,
No, that's,
no.
it's a home occupation. She has to file her DBA with the town clerk every 4 years, I believe it is. And she's the one who is responsible for filing with the state.
Okay. Motion to approve the project was made by Paul and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much.
You can call the office and we'll let you know the process.
Okay, great,
Here on
thanks so
out.
much.
It's a forum.
Thanks.
Up next, we have application 60-18, Novitsky, 24 Perch Pond Circle and T-Ticket.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Mass General Laws, you're hereby notified that Thomas J. and Constance E. Novitsky of T-Ticket, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-3C of the Code of Falmouth to construct a second-floor addition to existing garage on subject property known as 24 Perch Pond Circle, T-Ticket, Mass, map 34, section 3, parcel 9M, lot 6. Correspondence.
Referrals?
Let's see. Engineering, standard comments. Conservation Commission, no comment. Health Department, area above garage must not be used for sleeping purposes. An increase in bedroom number with the current septic system not allowed unless applicant can show enough capacity in the existing system. Planning Office, no comment. No impact from water. Assessor's Office, NA. Fire Department, no comment. And that's it. Correspondence.
There's no
letters.
correspondence, but I will ask you to go back to the red inked one, town engineering, and read that last
Oh.
sentence.
Okay, we recommend adding any dry wells, rain garden, or other stormwater measure for the new roof line.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and for the applicant?
Yeah, I'm Thomas Novitsky. I'm resident and owner of property at 24. David Cleary, my builder, was going to be here to do this tonight, but he had a dental thing this morning and he can't talk. He's not feeling too well, so. What we want to do here is go up above our garage. There's a storage space now under the roof, but we want to make it so that we can stand up there, and also connect it to the house where there's another storage space under the eave, where you have to crawl to get to the storage. And this way we have a walk access, and wouldn't have to put the ladder up to get up through the trapdoor in the garage anymore. The addition will be insulated and finished with sheetrock. And there'll be electrical, but no heat. This will be used only for storage. There will be windows for light and ventilation. And we just finished the rest of the house with new roof, new siding, new gutters, and that will just continue to this new addition. Again, there's existing dry wells, but they're probably, they're very old. So we'll probably have those replaced along with the new gutters for this addition. And that's basically it. It's a one-car garage. It'll stay a one-car garage. And the garage will also be insulated because it isn't current.
Jerry, do you have any questions?
No, per plan, you're adding that spiral staircase
Yes.
within the garage also.
Right, for access inside the garage, yes.
No more question.
Paul?
No, I have no questions.
No questions?
I don't have any questions, so.
I do. What's the use of the garage currently? Is it strictly for car and storage?
I just have car and storage, yes.
But it is sheet-rocked and insulated?
No, there's no sheetrock currently. It's just like I have pegboard along the sides.
Okay, so it will continue to be maintained as a garage for storage only?
Yes, but it will be insulated.
Okay. Thank you.
Any members of the public wish to have any questions, comments, concerns regarding the project? Yes, sir.
Mr.
Oh,
Novinsky?
if you could come up to the podium, please. If you could state your name and address for the record.
I'm Bob Ottaviano, 33 Birchmont Circle. I don't know if I can ask this, if it's PC or whatever, but what are you going to put up there? That
If you could
can
ask
put up a
if you could
spiral
ask through the
staircase?
board, sir.
You have to direct all questions to the board, and they'll get the
I was
answer for you.
wondering what you're going to put up there with a spiral staircase for access. You can't carry big boxes or anything, so everything must be tiny. And that's a lot of room that they're going to be filling up.
Can
That's all I had.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, if you could come back up to the podium.
The reason for the spiral staircase is just to save space in the garage. The footprint for the
Right.
spiral.
Through the board, please.
The footprint for the spiral staircase is much smaller than a regular staircase. And there's not that much storage out there. I might put my kayak up, but if you notice on the plans, there's a barn door in the front.
And that's functional?
And that'll
It's not
be
just
no, that'll be
decoration?
functional, yeah.
Okay.
So, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? No. Okay.
Move to close the hearing?
Move to close by Jerry. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. How would the board wish to proceed?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second that.
Made by Jerry and second by Paul. Moving on to findings.
I think it satisfies 243C and other requirements under 24216. Do I need to list them out? It's not going to be any...
No, just the testimony was that it's for storage only, and the garage will remain as storage only, no habitable space.
Sure.
And at least to address engineering's concerns about the dry wells, the applicant did say he had existing dry wells and he's intending on perhaps replacing them with new gutters.
No, the gutters will continue to flow from the new roof that he's having done, and the dry wells are outdated, and he will be upgrading those.
Okay. Anything else? No other findings?
And no closer to the property line than currently existing, right?
Mhm.
That was a good one.
Very good.
Those are the things we like to look out for.
Yeah,
Every once in a while. you-
yeah, I'm on it.
May I make a comment?
The hearing's closed.
We closed the hearing, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Conditions,
For plans?
Her plan, yeah.
no habitable
No habitable
space
space.
in either the garage or the storage.
Correct. You're gonna install new dry wells?
He's upgrading them.
Well, it's, okay, upgrade or new. I'm not sure how you upgrade a dry well, but I'll leave that up to the engineer.
Anything else?
I'm sure within the engineering comments, there was no flow will be directed off the property. Stormwater flow.
Pardon me?
If he's upgrading the dry wells,
All stormwater will be maintained on site.
that's,
And I
yeah,
add that in.
okay, thank you.
All right. If that's everything, motion was made by Jerry to approve, second by Paul. All those in favor? Aye, unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Novitsky.
Thank you.
At least you made it safely.
Yeah, it was a long drive.
Yeah. Pretty neat.
Okay, if the board would like to continue on with Mr. Bocelli and McDermott.
Right. Now that we have the full board, we can move back to the continuation that was scheduled for 6 o'clock. Application, I think it was 46-18. McDermott, 42 Tower House Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli, Dunlop
Excuse
Engineering.
me.
And I represent the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. McDermott, who are here in the audience tonight. This is a continued hearing. The hearing was continued after we received comments from the board at the initial hearing about two specific things. There was a question about a space within the third floor of the building that was not labeled. There was a suggestion as to whether or not it was really a necessary space. I discovered after the hearing through conversations with Mr. McDermott that it was contemplated at one point to be a possible bathroom for that floor, but it was going to be unfinished. Subsequent to the hearing, a decision was made to eliminate that space from the building. There was also questions and concerns about the appearance and the architectural look of the building. I didn't even attempt to translate that to Mr. McDermott or his architect. I simply asked them to review the video. So they watched the video and listened to all of your comments. And the architect, I believe, took into account your comments, and there were revisions made to the architecture that would satisfy you as to your concerns. I did want to remind the board of this. The current house has 5 bedrooms. The new house will have 4, so that's a significant difference in our opinion as to potential environmental impacts to wastewater flow. And in our opinion, we believe that this house is not substantially more detrimental than the existing house. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. McDermott because he'd like to speak to the construction and make some comments. He is a licensed general contractor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He intends to build this house, I believe, for yourself. He has many years of experience in the trade, and I'll turn it over, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Hi, good evening. My name is Bill McDermott. The address is 42 Tower House Road. I'd just like to pass out some of the photos of the new structure that we're going to do.
To the clerk, thank you.
And then in that package is photos of the existing structure. which sits on cinder block foundation. The house, we considered renovating it. As Mike said, I am a licensed builder. The house is in total disrepair. It sits on cinder blocks. Everything in the floor has been notched. I mean, you could take a golf ball and just roll in the whole house because it's just, everything is just so uneven. So the architect came up with a new plan. We're hoping that it's a little more appealing than the last. Other than that, the structures all around us have 3 floors. Some of the homes around us have roof decks. So as far as aesthetics, I think this is a great fit for the neighborhood. I know the neighbors are all for it.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah.
Or did you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
thank you. We'll turn it to board questions. Bob, do you have any questions?
None at the moment.
Paul?
No, I don't have any questions.
Kim?
Yeah, so I do have 2 questions. So what's the height of the proposed, the revised? Is it still the same height as the?
Yes,
So it was it 34 feet 4 inches?
yes, it remains the same.
And then when they say that they're building, this is what they're building. This doesn't match up with what they proposed. So is it just the styling of it?
That's the styling. If you look, there's a lot of the same elements.
Yeah.
It's sort of a flip, a mirror image in a lot of the elements, but that's, the purpose for the photo was to try to demonstrate to you that a photo sometimes gives you a 3-dimensional look at some of the detail that he proposes that might not really translate from the flat piece of paper on the elevation. So we wanted to demonstrate to you that he has, takes pride in his construction and intends to build a quality home that is aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Jerry, any questions?
Just following up, this one looks like you have a covered porch, that one. The one in front of us doesn't look like there's a covered porch.
There's a covered.
Oh, okay, then,
There's a covered porch, yes.
2 columns.
oh, okay. No, I think the picture's great, there's, I don't know whether we put the picture into the record or as what we are approving or.
No, we're not approving our plans before
The
you.
plans.
That's just a facsimile where he's trying to give you dimension
I think it
into
looks
the
great.
roof lines and the porch and the
And it looks better
balcony.
than the last proposal.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Sarik, anything?
I have nothing.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns from the public out there? All right, seeing none. We'll have a brief board discussion since we did ask them to revise the plans a bit. Ask them to come back. Everyone wants to start off. It's fine.
I just think it's kind of fun. I mean, I'm not using this for any sort of evaluation at all because it certainly doesn't depict what's proposed. It doesn't help me at all, but it's a completely different house. But so I'm just looking at what's proposed on the construction drawings or the drawings that are on the easel. So I don't know. I'm still thinking. I think I was kind of concerned about the height, but it goes to the limit. It's a 3,900 square foot lot. I don't know. That's all I have to say right now.
Kim, you got any?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is the height and the bulkiness of the structure, and I think what's proposed is certainly better, but I think if you were building this, and actually step down, I mean, I think this has more, for our concern was bulk, right? And so you have this 34-foot structure, it's kind of boxy, and that's still maintained in what they're proposing to do. So I am concerned, it's a tight lot, you're close to the property lines, and it's big. I mean, it goes right up against the 35 feet, and it's substantially taller than what's presently there. So I certainly understand the need to renovate, and to raise and rebuild, but it is right up against the lot, almost at the 35 feet, and you're kind of maxing out on that top floor. So that continues to be the concern, is the bulk, given how close it is to these setbacks.
If I could, I can't comment on the architecture. I'm not an architect. I can tell you that a couple things that we didn't say. First was, if you look at the house from the street, the home to the left is 2.5 stories, consistent with this. It was raised and reconstructed in the last 10 years, and it went through a review process by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and there were similar, review. And this house is very consistent with that house. There's other elements to the home that improve the conditions on the site as far as aesthetics. There's also environmental improvements, and I'm not, it's very discretionary to decide whether this is a substantial detriment to the neighborhood, and I don't know that it is a substantial detriment. I don't know that it rises to that level. But that being said, we also do not want to be faced with a denial if you're not satisfied, so I'm not sure where that leaves us.
I think, there's been changes, but I don't think changes that really are substantial enough to make a huge difference. The front elevation's a little different. You get that eyebrow dormer, those gables, but it's still, the side and rear elevations are very similar to what was previously proposed. I don't know. Anything, is it detrimental? Is it substantially detrimental? I don't know. It's definitely detrimental, but is it substantially detrimental? I don't know if I'm there yet. It's a massive expansion over what's currently there, though.
I think it's an expansion. I don't know if I consider it extremely detrimental, given the architecture changes that are going around with the heights where small houses are getting torn down, they're getting built larger. If this bulk density is correct, there are 2 other houses, granted they're on bigger lots, bigger, if I'm reading this correct. I guess I'm not as concerned with the bulk, because I think we've had other bulk projects where it was a box with a couple of windows in them or something like that. This has some nice architectural detail. And I don't know how we could recommend, and maybe listen to the fellow board members on, how would you recommend cutting down on the bulk? Height?
I am a little concerned with the bulk, just with the styling. I almost wish that we didn't see this, because the way the roof lines are placed in this, it actually breaks up the massing of the building, where that's a straight across, and the actual in cuts are basically at the same length of the roof line. There was a mention in the file somewhere that even though you didn't have to go in front of historic, that they had made some suggestions, and I thought it said that you had incorporated some suggestions. Did that happen at all?
I'd have to let Mr. McDermott speak to that. He presented the plans to the Historic Commission. I don't have the specific knowledge of that.
During the Historical Commission meeting, we had, the first plan we had come up with, they were more concerned with more architectural details. So that's where we came up with this new design for the house.
So on the
Not only as a recommendation that we told the Historical Commission that, yeah, we get it. We were interested in a gambrel, we call it Nantucket style front of the house. They were more interested in A-frame. So this is how we came up with this, not to appease them, but just to be conforming. And as far as height, I don't know if you guys have been up in the Heights. Every single neighbor that we have is up 3.5 stories with roof decks and, you know, the height of this house is not going to be any more detrimental than everyone else's house around us. Everybody's had the ability to go up 35 feet in the last 10 or 15 years since they renovated, so I don't understand why that would be an issue, but, so our concern is we're trying to maximize bedrooms. We have 5 current bedrooms, we're going down to 4 bedrooms, and there's no physical way to get a 4th bedroom on that 2nd floor, so we could reduce the size of the house. If we did, there would be shoebox rooms, and there's no value to it. I mean, this is a place where we're going to retire, hopefully, eventually. So we're trying to do the right thing, build a nice house in a beautiful neighborhood. We love the Heights. And honestly, the height, if you've seen the neighbors, everyone's house around us, they're 3 stories, and they have, you know, roof decks, so it's pretty high.
Did you get a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Commission?
We did.
Was that submitted to the file? I don't remember it.
I don't know.
I think the board's gonna wanna see that, because it will have the plans that they approved on it.
The Historical Commission can't approve anything. They were just there for
I'd
a
like to see
delay.
the certificate of appropriateness.
I didn't get one,
You didn't get one?
no. Not that I have any
Michael, why
knowledge
was
of.
he in front of the Historic Commission?
For demolition delay
So-
only. It's
Right.
not in a historic district. They have no
Okay.
say over the architecture.
No, I realized I didn't understand why you were there.
Demolition delay.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, so I don't know if you want to have, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, given that there's what, at least 3 versus 1.
You guys,
We could-
you're still discussing.
Well, yeah, but the discussion is, should we continue it rather than, with the approval of the,
Well, I was going to talk about the merits still.
oh, okay,
I wasn't
all
gonna-
right.
So, well, I just wanted to say, I mean, I understand the desire, I'm certainly not an architect, so, but I understand the desire to, you know, have a fourth bedroom on the 3rd floor, but we also have, or what they're proposing is a large kind of deck that you can't see from the front, so that's adding to the roof line. If there was a way to kind of step that in or eliminate the deck, or just something to minimize that bulk, and I do want to say, I mean, I certainly haven't I've sat on a lot of applications, I'm sure not all the ones that he's referring to, but it's important to note that we're presented with this application. So we're not looking at these other properties. If those other properties went up to 35 feet, I mean, maybe there was a greater setback, maybe there was some other thing coming into play for those properties. So I think these setbacks are very tight. It's a short, 22-foot house that's there right now, so that's why I think there's this concern about going up so much, right, to the limit. So anyways, that's my perspective. I mean, I think it would be nice to have something from the, I don't know if there is anything from historic.
Well, no,
No.
he's under the demolition delay
Okay.
bylaw, so that's
So-
totally different, and they don't have a certificate of appropriateness for that. They don't oversee.
I just think it's,
Just that the house was on that list.
I don't think enough of an attempt has been made to bring it into closer compliance, but to make it less enormous, searching for the word.
Bulky.
Yeah, less bulky. I mean, I know that you'd redesigned to some degree, but I don't think it was, it's not enough for me. I wouldn't vote for this. I'm not voting in favor of it.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you get to chime in?
No, I'd like to see something proposed to try to deal with the bulk, whether it's a roof line or a door or...
And are you talking the front facade as well as the rear facade or side
Yeah, I mean,
facade?
it's-
Give them a little bit of direction.
It is a corner lot.
It still looks like a big box.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned
Exactly.
with the front facade, but yeah, it is.
But the front facade, I guess, would be have more effect on anything than the rear. It's just, it looks like a big box.
I mean, that,
I mean, this photo, even though it's not, I mean, this would be great up there. I vote for this in a second.
That's how it is.
Well, we haven't seen the side and rear though.
Yeah, but it fits the architectural, yeah.
Insubstantial changes, not gonna get me there.
So it looks like you have, what?
Well, either way, you don't have.
You don't
need
have your
all
full
four.
four
Oh, we have
votes.
5 of us, right? Yeah.
So do you have 4 votes? And if not,
Doesn't sound-
Mr. Berselli, if you want him to either ask for a continuation or withdrawal, but is the consensus a 3-2 or a,
I would like to see a little more effort done with the bulkiness, especially on the top
so
there.
now it just
So we're
became?
all in agreement.
Okay, you're all in agreement. Mr. Berselli?
Mr. Vasselli?
Well, as I said, I'm not an architect, I'm representing the client for the purposes of the zoning, and I think architecture is a very discretionary, subjective thing, and my only fear is that you don't have guidelines for the architecture, so this could be like a perpetual thing. We haven't gone far enough, we're gonna come back, well, you're almost there, but not quite there. So I'm gonna step away from that discussion because I'm not qualified, and I don't wanna get myself into that circular discussion. We have 2 options, force a denial and come back, wait 2 years, or continue. So I think it's obvious we're gonna want a continuance, so I guess I need to ask for a continuance.
I just want to respond, if I may. I mean, certainly the architecture is the concern, but only relative to our concern about bulk and about the height and about the massing on that 3rd floor. So
Sure.
that's in our purview, and that's the concern. So
Sure.
So certainly that can be addressed. However the architect decides to do that, I think that would, based on what we're discussing.
If I could just remind you, and it's not gonna convince you, but I'm gonna remind you of it anyway, we did submit bulk calculations, and we're right in the median for the neighborhood. In fact, our lot coverage is less. So again, you know, the bulk goes in the architectural styling, sort of go hand in hand. You know, form follows function, I suppose, is what we've all heard. So I can't speak to that, because that's about all I know about architecture. I guess you want a continuance?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to just, my question.
Yeah.
But you'd have to come up to the podium, please, sir.
Well, he's coming up, I'd like to suggest to Mr. Boselli, in the past, photographs of the existing neighborhood helps put things in perspective. Other than driving by, it's
You know, I thought of that tonight when I met with Mike. I should have taken photos of the 4 surrounding homes that are 35 feet in height. So, just for clarity, what is this board looking for?
Well, it's not, certainly not our intent to, make this a perpetual thing. We do want to offer you some guidance as to exactly what we're looking for, and it comes down to the bulk.
So reduce the width of the house, the height of the house,
that's how you define bulk, right? I don't mean to be wide.
No, I get
You
it, I
can't redesign the
understand.
house for him.
Right.
Can't
Right,
redesign
we're
the
not-
house for him.
Yeah, we, like Suri said, we can't ask you to redesign the entire house or force that upon you.
Their issue is with bulk and the roof lines, I believe, is what a couple members have said, so.
Bulk and what, I'm sorry?
Roof lines, because roof lines help break up that bulk, similar to that photo that you brought in. So, outside of the board not redesigning your house, I think you take those cues.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Berselli, continuation date? How long do you think it'll take you? I can put you on October 4th, if that gives you enough time.
Absolutely.
I know we gave you 2 weeks this last time, and this is a little bit more. Is that okay? Mr. Berselli, are you going to be present? October 4th?
We'll take October 4th, please.
Board members, are you going to be present October 4th?
I guess so, yeah.
Anyone want to make that motion?
I'll move to continue hearing our application number 5518 to October 4th, 2018 at 6:30 here in Town Hall.
Thank you.
Made by Kim, second by Bob, all those in favor?
Aye.
Kim and Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You already did that?
Yeah. Oops.
And up next, we have application 63-18 Stark, 19 Commodore Lane in East Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Peter and Karen Stark of Mansfield, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-20G1A of the Code of Falmouth to construct a third bay addition to existing garage on subject property known as 19 Commodore Lane, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, and for referrals. Engineering had its standard comment. We recommend adding dry wells, rain garden, or other stormwater measures for the roof. Concom had no comment. Health says, okay, proposed project equals 4 bedrooms. Applicant has a 4-bedroom septic design proposed. Assessors had no comment. Water responded not applicable. Planning had no comment. Fire department had no comment. And there was some correspondence from Peter Stark regarding the application.
And for the applicant?
How you doing? Excuse me, I'm Jeff Ryder with BSS Design. With me also is Russ Crockford, excuse me, with GMP Architects, and also the applicant, Peter Stark, in the second row. Tonight we're in front of you for a third garage bay. The reason that we're here for a special permit is the lot is only is less than 30,000 square feet. So I believe it's about 20,000 and change. So the section we're under is 240-23G1A. And that says that garage space for more than 2 cars and the lot is less than 30,000. That's the reason we're here tonight. Otherwise, you know, we have a building permit. All the dimensional requirements, setbacks are met, existing and proposed, which is a good thing. Lot coverage has been met. It's much less than 20%. Going to the garage bay itself, it's going to be a garage bay for the third car, which is an antique vehicle, I believe. And let me turn this around here. Russ has got a full set of plans here. I just got this for a quick explanation of the third bay. It's in this area here, highlighted in yellow. So this section here is set back 4 feet to sort of break it up a little bit. So, just to go over a few things about the addition, it won't cast any shadows onto any of butters. I will give you a couple of these here. This is from the GIS. What that represents is the areas that are around the site. that are not disturbed. This is the GIS here. There's no dwelling across the street. Up here in the backyard is fully vegetated. Over here is vegetated, so the butters won't even see it, which I think is a good thing. Again, I think the septic here is for a 4-bedroom. There's going to be no new bedrooms. And the reason for that is it's an old leach pit style small tank system. Lastly, the addition is architecturally consistent with the existing houses in the neighborhood, so they're very similar. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Russ to talk about the addition.
Russell Crockford, I'm with Gene Peter Architects. Our firm designed this for Mr. Stark. Essentially what we're doing here is we're just adding, it's about 12 feet of extension to the left of the existing garage. This roof line that you see here is existing and will be maintained. This is pushed back 4 feet from the face of this. We've matched the materials on the roof. The details for the rake boards and are all matching. The shape of the garage door will all be identical to what is there now. This house had received, prior to the Starks purchasing it, was recently renovated, updated. It's, the siding is new, the paint is new, the roof is new, so it's going to be very easy to match those materials and the colors, so this will look like it was all part of the house originally. We've thrown a dormer on here, slightly smaller in scale than what was there, but with similar details. And this is part of another addition. This whole project, there is an addition that's going on in the back of the house. It's obviously not why we're here. It's primarily for the garage. And the current garage is 540 square feet, and the proposed addition is another 320 square feet. This does show how it is stepped back. There will be some storage that we're going to access above this, and we have put in a small stair to get up above. And then this is all part of the project where they're adding a mud hall, first floor laundry, and another great room to the back of the house. And this addition also facilitates access from the garage into the house, where now you have to come out of the garage into this covered entry and then come into the house this way. So that kind of helps the usefulness of this garage addition and the rear addition, kind of tie the whole thing together. Questions?
Okay. Questions from the board? Bob, we'll start with you.
Just the space over the garage is just storage only?
Unfinished storage, no
Unfinished,
heat.
no heat?
There will be some drywall that needs to go in there to separate it for fire code to the living space, but just on one wall. The rest would just be open studs, open rafters, and just plywood on the floor, just straight storage. No heat, no insulation.
That's all I have.
I have no questions.
Kim?
Yeah, just intention to add any drywalls to the property, just to respond to the engineering referral.
I have to ask Jeff for the site.
There's no dry wells shown on the plan, so the engineering referral is recommending dry wells for the new addition of roof runoff.
I understand, yeah, that'd be fine, very typical. But it is a very flat lot and sandy soil, so.
Okay, that was all I have.
Jerry, any questions?
No question.
All right. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Seeing none, back to the board. What would be the board's pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
You can have a seat, Russ.
Motion was made by Paul and seconded by Kim. All those in favor? Aye. And how would the board like to proceed?
I will move that we approve application 6318.
I will second that.
Moving on to findings.
I'll just say, what's this? I made some findings about setback, is that the design, so that the third bay is stepped back, and that they're maintaining the roof line. It's just gonna be storage above the garage, unfinished, no heat. Increased utilization for the applicant. Testimony that dry wells will be added as determined, whatever we do for that dry well in Surrey. And what, 24216 because it's a special permit. That's all I had. I didn't have much.
I think it's a beautiful design.
Right. And the use of that third bay is for an antique car. I think it's always nice to include the purpose of that third bay because it's.
As long as you don't condition him to be
No,
held to that.
but I think it's worth her finding. It's not every day you see a third bay in a
Yes.
garage in Falmouth. Anything else
Condition per plans.
for plans?
No habitable space above garage.
No heat.
New garage. And and the dry well, just whatever the language is, as the engineer.
Additional
Seems
dry
to know.
wells to be located per the discretion of the
Yes.
engineer?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so I think we have everything. That motion to approve was made by Kim and second by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you. Very good, thank you very much.
All right, and we will take a 5-minute break. All right, and we are back from our break. We will get right back into it with 64-18 case, 46 Iroquois Road in T-Ticket.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Robert R. and Margaret E. Case of T-Ticket, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-3C of the Code of Falmouth to convert existing one-car garage to a two-car garage attached to the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 46 Iroquois Street, T-Ticket, Massachusetts. For referrals, engineering said see attached. This application was reviewed only for impacts to public right of ways and public utilities. Iroquois Street and Mara Vista Avenue are public right of ways in this area. The proposed driveway alteration will require filing a driveway permit with the engineering division. We discussed the proposed driveway location with the tree warden in regards to the existing oak near the proposed driveway apron expansion, since the oak tree is a street tree. The tree warden confirmed that what is shown on the plan would negatively impact the tree, specifically the root system. The work is too close to the base of the tree. As such, the engineering division would not approve the driveway alteration as shown. We recommend that the applicant revise the plans to keep the driveway away from the oak tree, perhaps tying the proposed additional width into the existing apron near the end of the fence. This should be far enough away from the oak tree to satisfy the tree warden. Due to the additional width, a driveway permit would still be required. In addition to the oak tree issue, we will not approve a driveway permit where an impervious driveway would discharge stormwater runoff into the public way. We recommend that the applicant revise the plans to mitigate for the stormwater runoff on site. Any connections or alterations to public utilities would require permission from the appropriate town department. The project must not direct any stormwater runoff to public property, abutters, or rights of way. We recommend adding dry wells, rain garden, or other stormwater measure for the roof. Concom had no comment. Health said on sewer, no issues. Assessors includes lots 61, 62, and 63. Water, not applicable. Planning had no comment. Fire had no comment, and there was a request, I believe by the applicant or his representative or their representative, requesting that Rod Palmer, the building inspector, designate Iroquois Street side of the property as the primary front yard to allow a side yard setback to Mara Vista Avenue, and that was done in May.
And just for the board's information, the plans were redone. You're looking at a submission date by the applicant's representative on August 28th, where the driveway was readjusted so that there's no issue with that oak tree. And there was a dry well put in on the southwest corner of the new addition.
Okay, and with that having been said, for the applicant?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dick Betzig, and I represent the owner, who's also with us today, Robert Case. And as you can see by the filing, essentially, we're going to take an existing single-car garage and replace it with a two-car garage. The two-car garage will end up being roughly 22 feet wide, which is slightly narrower than normal two-car garages, but it will have a depth of 26 feet. The current lot coverage is 1693.5 square feet at 23.51%. The proposed will go to 1,720 square feet, which brings up the total percentage to 23.89. That's an increase of 0.38%. And as indicated earlier, there will not be any curb cuts. The existing curb cut will remain as is per the revised plan that I submitted to you. And we will not be increasing any of the habitable space. The existing entry to the present garage is strictly from the garage doors. You cannot access that garage currently from the house. That will remain the same when we build the new structure. The purpose of the structure is strictly for storage and additional space for, again, a lover of antique cars. It's a single-story garage with just storage space up above with a scuttle that goes up to it. There will not be any staircases. There will be an exterior exit coming out of the rear. All else remains pretty much as is today. Stormwater will be controlled as per the revised plan that I submitted to you folks.
Okay. Further questions? Bob, you want to start us off?
I don't think I have any questions at this point, just one comment on the scuttle pull down that's on the plans. It's just shown on the first floor of the garage, but it doesn't show on the storage space, so you may want to add that in.
Okay? We'll make note of that.
I don't have any questions.
Kip, any questions?
Yeah, just, I guess, if it's just storage up above, why did you do that bump out on the second level of the garage?
To give it more curb appeal from both sides, considering it's a corner lot. And it obviously gives you a lot more light upstairs.
And you said no habitable space, right? No heat?
No.
Okay.
The first floor will be insulated. You have a demising wall that needs to be, sheetrocked for fire protection. But the upstairs will not be heated, insulated, or finished.
Was the wood patio, was that,
I'm sorry?
was the wood patio, I know that's, the wood, proposed 12 by 16 foot wood patio in the backyard?
Okay, and your question is?
Where was that calculated? Was that calculated as part of the structure, or is the structure parking pavement?
No, the patio in the back is patio on grade, is what the proposed patio is in the back.
So it's not a wood patio?
It's a wood patio on grade.
Okay. So then, I guess same question, so is calculated into total lot coverage, not lot coverage by structures?
Total coverage still considers The patio on grade is not considered as lot coverage.
Okay,
Yeah, that's correct. It's omitted from the lot coverage
Okay.
because it's on grade. So it's considered a patio, wood patio on grade.
Okay. Thank you.
Jerry, any questions?
Just for my own clarification, a wood patio on grade is basically landscape? Because it's not being covered as a structure?
No, there's no cover on it. There's no rails on it. It's essentially one step up, 7 inches. It's one step up from the lawn.
But it's a wooden structure, it would be like a deck, only it's up.
Yeah, it's a deck, flat on grade, 7-inch, one riser up to the deck.
A deck's considered lot coverage, whether they're on grade or not, elevated, I'm just asking, kind of.
I mean, yeah, I don't think you can call, yeah.
Well, attached, first of all, it's not attached.
Yeah, but that
It's
doesn't matter.
detached, so that also is under consideration of a patio. Where if it were attached and elevated, it would be considered otherwise as coverage.
Okay, I just wasn't aware of that. Good. Yeah, I
Maybe
mean,
we can follow up on this.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Jerry?
No, I'm, during discussion, I'm like,
Okay, well,
a
we'll address
garage
that.
is separated with its coverage.
We'll address that. Regarding the bump out that Kim brought up, would it be fair to say that it also offers like more room to move around up there?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, because it runs 9 feet. And it also reduces the bulk so that we don't have such a large structure. And as you can see, the overall height is 21 plus feet, basically. So it blends in. I trust you have a architectural rendition of it.
Yes, they do.
We do,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Any other questions from the board at this time? Sari, any questions? No? Okay. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? All right, seeing none, coming back to the board. Would the board like to have any discussion regarding this?
Yes, so I mean, there's two things I want to talk about. One, the first was that I was going to suggest that we amend to add 240-69E because they're increasing the lot coverage. Anyways, I know that they could do that up to 25%. So I'd recommend that we add that to their application. But I am concerned about the wood patio on grade because it has a step up. It sounds like it's a deck.
Excuse me, it's under 240-3C, it's already pre-existing non-conforming.
Yeah, but you're making it more non-conforming, so why
Slightly,
not add,
but it's already over the 20%.
but you're making
So
it more.
they're not asking permission to exceed the 20% under 240-69E. They're already over it, they're pre-existing
I think
non-conforming,
we've
which
done this
was
in the past.
conforming back in 2002. So it was made pre-existing non-conforming.
I get it, but you're making it more non-conforming without a special, I mean, and we can just amend
But
to
they're
add the special
pre-existing
permit.
non-conforming, so we've always done it under 240-3C because they're already pre-existing non-conforming
can't-
in lot coverage.
Right, but you can't make something more non-conforming.
It's not exceeding the 25%.
But they don't have a special permit to go up to 25%.
Because they were already over the 20%.
They were over the 20%, I understand
Made
that.
non-conforming by the bylaw
I
change.
understand that, so
Well,
if
it's
they
up to
were,
the board. I
if they
don't
were
wanna-
remaining at 20 point whatever they're at, and not increasing, I agree. But I think to make this lawful, you've gotta add the 240-69E. And I don't think it does any harm. That's
That's
just my
up to you,
opinion.
that's up to the board.
Anyways, but I think the wood patio on grade presents a bigger issue, because I think it sounds like it's, as it was described, it sounds like it's a deck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a provision in the bylaw that says decks less than 30 inches above grade aren't considered lot coverage. I'm just not an expert on the bylaw, but it's just a question as to whether or not it's considered lot
What do
coverage.
you think?
It's not in the zoning bylaw. Anything that is attached to the structure that is wooden or whatever, regardless of its height, is considered lot coverage by structures. In the past, people have put wooden decks, and if they can percolate, if they're not on a concrete pad, if they were, it would go under total lot coverage. This is something that I haven't discussed with the building commissioner that is new. We haven't had this case in probably 10 years. And under the old building commissioner, it was taken at his discretion. So this would be up to the current building commissioner to rule on whether he feels this structure itself, or the wooden deck, I won't call it a structure because that's his determination, would be considered lot coverage by structures. They did remove the shed, and they did take that off the house, so they felt like it wouldn't be considered part of the structure to minimize the increase in the lot coverage by structures. So that's the rationale, but that would be the building commissioner's determination. I haven't run across this in over 10 years, and that is the building commissioner's determination as to how he feels it goes.
Wouldn't a shed, a garage, everything, anything not detached?
A
that's
shed
wood,
is different. A
structure,
shed is a structure.
Yeah, shed's roofed.
No, but, okay.
A shower. A
It's a
shower
structure.
isn't
Okay, it's a-
considered a structure.
A platform, I guess, is a platform, a wooden platform detached from the house, a structure.
I mean, I'd call it a patio. If it's at grade, I'd call it a patio. But for the selection of materials, let's say it was brick, or let's say it was wood. I mean, I guess wood is pervious to some degree, but, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it. It's just an interesting question. What do we call it? That's all. I just, you know, I would consider it a patio if it's at grade level, but is it calculated under lot coverage?
It would have to be covered under total lot coverage unless the building commissioner finds it to be pervious, depending on the type of construction of deck. If it's the composite with no percolation or whatever, he may deem it total lot coverage. I don't know. This isn't something that I have a ruling on by the building commissioner.
In any case, does the amount of coverage matter in this case?
Yes.
No, we're talking about.
It does. If the building
Yes.
commissioner determines it to be structure, then it puts it over the 25%, I believe. If he does not, then it would be his determination if it would be under total lot coverage,
Okay.
the
So
40%.
it's an important clarification that we need.
Mhm.
Should we ask for continuance or a condition? A conditional approval is always iffy.
Yes, yeah, Rob.
Yeah, no, so I'd be more comfortable finding out what the building commissioner.
Yeah, and I think we're just
Defines
getting
it
into
as-
this dangerous, like, where people, so it's separated by, I mean, I can't tell, it looks like it's minimally separated from the structure, but it's a raised wooden platform, and we're gonna call that a patio. It's much like what we've been seeing in town with patios that are actually, supported by rebar, and that's not a structure. So I think we're getting into this kind of area where people are trying to be a little bit cute about it. I think a wood patio to me sounds like a deck. I've never heard wood patio. And I think the applicant certainly has an opportunity to amend the plan and make it a patio landscaping material, or to seek the determination of the building commissioner.
I think it's an important distinction to be made, and Kim, to your point regarding 240-69E, I don't think it hurts the board to amend the application like that. I think it only serves to protect the applicant.
It would have to be the applicant to agree to the board to add that
Yeah.
to the application, 240-69E. Do you understand what that is?
Well, I don't know what the implications are.
240-69E allows the board to vote on an increase of lot coverage by structures up to 25% when it exceeds the 20% maximum allowed by right under 240-69A.
But we tried our best to keep it under that 25%, as you can see.
I realize that. What I'm telling you is that it is pre-existing non-conforming. It is going from 23, whatever it is, to, you are increasing it a tad, and that's what Ms. Beelan is saying, because it is being increased. She and the board now believe that that you should apply for 240-69E as well, which they can amend it right here. You don't have to reapply.
Okay, so you can amend it on the fly today, and you can proceed with a vote, or I
Yes.
don't know how you're
Yeah,
going to
I
do
mean-
this, okay.
The
I
board
don't-
can vote
yeah.
to add that to the application.
By the way, just one point of interest, I did discuss the materials to be used for the deck. We're considering a patio, and the building commissioner said that, in fact, you can build patios out of any material you want. The big issue is if it's attached or detached, and if it's raised or not.
No, I agree.
So
That's
the
not
fact
even-
that it's detached now completely, we're about 5 feet away from the property.
Yeah.
You have that in writing?
Well, it's on the plan.
What are you
And it's
planning?
it also shows you the grade of that patio on the plan.
No, he was asking if you had that determination by the building commissioner in writing.
No, we had an informal discussion.
No, I mean, I do get requests from time to time for determination as to whether or not a wood structure literally on grade is considered a deck or a patio. I consider them patios, but I don't have strong feelings about it. I just, just wondering what, at grade, I would say,
I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. At grade, I would call it a patio if it's truly at grade, but it doesn't tell us. It says proposed wood patio. Is it a foot off the ground?
Well, it is exactly 7 inches off of the ground, and you can see that on the engineering plan. I purposely noted the proposed elevation for that patio.
I think we're at a disadvantage because you're requesting a modification to a pre-existing non-conforming dwelling. You haven't provided elevations for the rear of the structure where we could see what's being constructed back there.
Okay, it's on the plan.
Okay, again, but we weren't provided with elevations of the rear of the property.
Well, you have an as-built that shows you the existing elevations, and you have the proposed. That
Of the
also-
front, and of the garage.
Well,
We're
we're
gonna
talking
argue with you,
about the
sir.
patio.
So I will move that we continue because I would like to see further information from the building commissioner relative to whether that constitutes a structure or a patio, what's being proposed. And I think we could deal with 240-69E next time based on that determination so that we're making the appropriate thing.
All right, so you don't want to vote to approve to add 240-69E tonight?
I mean, it might change the project, the calculation based on
Oh, I see
the
what you're saying.
determination.
Okay, that's fine.
Could I ask the applicant a question? Is there any reason why you just don't bring it down to grade? Rather, why are you bringing it up to set, change the landscaping so this patio is at grade?
That's what we are doing.
You're 7 inches above grade, you
No,
said.
well, that's what we are doing. Right now, the patio is 3 feet above grade. It's being knocked down to grade, and it's being reduced in size. That's
Yes.
essentially what we're doing. And the only reason we're maintaining the wood structure is because the owner's wife prefers wood instead of concrete or poured in place, et cetera, et cetera. So,
I guess I'm agreeing with Kim that we need to see some elevation.
And that's fine, but we just need a little bit of additional information regarding that.
Just something from the building commissioner that he agrees with the determination that it's not considered a structure and part of the lot coverage by structures.
Yeah.
Is that what the board is asking
Yeah.
for?
Yeah, that's all,
So a continuation date, do you consider this minor enough to where it would only take 10 or 15 minutes, or are you looking for more information outside of that? Do you have any other questions on the project?
I don't.
Strictly about the lot coverage?
If the commissioner says it is a structure requiring coverage, then
Then it's up to the applicant to deal with the lot coverage at that point.
before he comes into us.
Mhm.
No, just so he'll understand.
He understands. Right, Dick?
yeah, I understand. Any other questions?
I think that's it.
So I'll move that we continue to September 20th.
Yes, if you
2018.
promise me that it'll,
It has to be at 6:30 because obviously I can't get here. so-
I won't be here on September 20th, if it matters.
well, it'll be a quorum of 4 at that point then.
Yeah, it's still, yeah.
You fine with that? Okay. So September 20th, you can, by that time, get something from the building commissioner?
I will not be here September 20th.
Okay.
You
so
won't?
What's the next?
So October
oh, sorry.
4th? October 4th?
Good for me.
So then I will revise my motion and move to continue application 6418 to 6:30 on October 4th here in Town Hall.
Motion was made by Kim, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
The sooner you get with the building commissioner and forward that information, I can get it to the board. Right, thank you, Dick.
Thank you. All right. Up next, we have application 61-18 Campion, 20 Sheridan Avenue in Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Heather Campion of Brookline, Massachusetts, filed an appeal with the Falmouth Town Clerk pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Sections 8 and 15, and 240-202 of the Code of Falmouth, appealing the building commissioner's determination that the bulkhead and deck, elevated walkway are in violation of 240-77 of the Code of Falmouth and requires a building permit. The subject property is 20 Sheridan Avenue, Falmouth, Massachusetts. And we didn't receive any referrals.
On an appeal, the only one that we ever send it to is the building commissioner and the planning board and the selectmen.
But we received new information in the last 24 hours.
Not in the last 24 hours, we have not.
I will make the comment that we've received plenty of information this work week, and the voluminous in nature. I know for one, I haven't had the time to go through all of it. And I didn't speak to other members of the board, but I'm sure they would agree with me that there was plenty of information to sift through. I did try my best, but many of us do have full-time jobs, and it's tough to get to that information the week of. I know the board has a policy to submit everything 2 weeks in advance. So just with that caveat, we can start this hearing. And for the appellant?
Yes, my name is Charles Sabat. I represent the appellant Heather Campion, who owns the property at 20 Sheridan Drive in Falmouth, Massachusetts. And we are appealing tonight from an order of the building commissioner that was issued earlier this year, this summer, ordering my client to apply to the Falmouth Board of Selectmen under the Falmouth zoning bylaw for a special permit for the maintenance of an existing bulkhead at the property, which is fronts on Falmouth Harbor. And let me, if I may, give you some background. And I know, as you said, you have a lot of material that you've received, and let me provide you with some background. In actually going back further than that, there is a stone and mortar seawall, which is on the front of the property at 20 Sheridan Avenue, which fronts on Falmouth Harbor. And if you look at old plans that go back probably to the early part of the 20th century, you'll see that there was a continuous stone and mortar seawall that ran from the opening of Falmouth Harbor on that westerly side of the harbor, all the way along what is now Mr. McLaughlin's property, Mr. Jeffroy's property, the Campion property, and then the property to the north. Earlier in the 1990s, the Millettes, who then owned 20 Sheridan Avenue, obtained an amnesty Chapter 91 license from the Department of Environmental Protection, which authorized them not only to maintain the existing seawall, but also to maintain the existing pier. There's a pier at 20 Sheridan Avenue also. Part of that Chapter 91 license required the owners, the Millettes and now Mrs. Campion, to maintain the existing seawall, in which he had an obligation to make sure that the seawall remained in good order and in good condition and good repair. So in 2009, it became apparent that the seawall was beginning to deteriorate and was in danger of collapsing into Falmouth Harbor. And so Mrs. Millette, or the Millette family, I should say, retained Falmouth Engineering, Michael Borselli is here tonight, to prepare a proposal for the repair of that existing and licensed seawall. And the plan, which is a fairly typical approach to repair of seawalls, was to drive vinyl sheeting on the seaward side of the seawall, and then to put a cap on top of that in order to encase and to stabilize the pre-existing seawall so that it wouldn't drop into Falmouth Harbor. And that was the original plan that was presented to the Conservation Commission in 2009. And in 2010, an order of conditions issued allowing the repair of the seawall by means of putting in that vinyl sheeting on the seaward side and then capping it with the decking material. So in June of 2010, Mr. Devaney, or Devaney Construction, or Devaney Construction, went out to the site and they began to prepare the area for the installation of the vinyl sheathing. What they discovered was that the seawall did not go straight up and down, and that instead it angled out into the harbor, and it was supported by toe stones that were on the surface or beneath the surface, in the mud beneath the surface of the water. So they were not able to drive the vinyl sheeting directly into the existing toe stones, and if they removed the toe stones, the wall would have collapsed into Falmouth Harbor. So Mr. Devaney decided that the better solution would be to move the vinyl sheeting more seaward, it turns out approximately 10 inches, and to move the sort of everything a bit more seaward in order to accommodate the existence of the toe stones. He notified the conservation agent of this necessity, in his view, to change in the field the work that they were doing. She came down to the site. She made observations there, and according to Mr. Devaney, approved the proceeding with the project with its minor modification in the field. So the structure gets built in the summer of 2010. In the fall of 2010, the Department of Environmental Protection was notified by the neighbor to the north, then Mr. Strakish. That property has now changed hands. They were notified by him. He was objecting to the repair and the sheeting and so on. So the DEP came down and they said that the Millettes would be required to submit an application for a Chapter 91 license to the DEP to allow the maintenance of the existing bulkhead. That application was prepared in January of 2011. It was, I believe it's dated January 13 of 2011. And there was a plan that was prepared, a draft plan, showing the location of the existing bulkhead, the existing sheeting, and the cap that was put on top, and so on. That plan is dated January 13 of 2011. And that plan was the plan that was appended to the application that was submitted to the DEP. And that's an issue tonight, which I wasn't aware of, frankly, until this week. This is not a criticism of anybody, but when I received the building commissioner's order and his letter, he provided me with a letter in which he responded to some of the arguments that I had made to him. He focused on the argument that I'm going to address a little bit tonight, which is Mr. Jeffroy's notice and his ability to appeal any of this. And he said that there was a letter enclosed from Attorney Arment. There was no letter enclosed. And I sent an email to the building department, and again, not a criticism, asking, can you provide me with a copy before I file this application? And I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just accidental. I mean, I miss half my emails when they come in. I didn't get the copy, but I did receive it this week when Ms. Boudreau was kind enough to send it to me. Apparently, Attorney Arment submitted it. And he also Attorney Arment submitted an email in which he suggests, as he did in that letter of May 2018, suggests that it's unknown whether or not the building commissioner at that time saw or was given an accurate depiction of what had happened out on the site in terms of the change of the construction. And I have I obtained the 2011 draft plan that I have copies of, and I know you're already overburdened with materials, but I think this is fairly significant, and that is that this is the plan, which I'll, with your permission, I'll distribute it to you. It's very similar, if not identical, to the license plan that is dated November of 2012, which is appended to the submission that I gave you. And in that license plan and in this plan that was dated January 13 of 2011, it's very explicit as to what transpired out on the site. If you look at, and you can look at sheet 2 of 3 in the licensing plan that I've filed with you, because it's exactly the same. There are notations on that plan in big bold type, or big type right on the face of the plan. It says, it shows permitted location of sheet pile bulkhead, shown as a dashed line. Then up above again, permitted location of 4-foot wide timber deck, shown as a dashed line. He then has on the other side, as-built location of sheet pile bulkhead, as-built location of 4-foot wide timber deck. Then we go to sheet 3 of 3, and again, with the exception of one change, because DEP required that some material be taken out of the final draft of this plan, but again, the same language is in there and the same design. He shows on this draft plan of January 13 of 2011 that the as-built location of the sheet pile is 10 inches further seaward than what is permitted. He shows permitted location of sheet pile bulkhead. He shows as-built location of sheet pile bulkhead. Again, all in the final license plan, which I have provided you a copy with, that's attached to the materials that I submitted. And if I may, I'd like to submit this to the board.
If you can give it to the chair, we can stamp it. I'm sorry, the chair.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
A little slip there.
Thank you.
I have a copy.
Thank you.
And I've got a copy for
I didn't know you were going to be here, so which one do you want to?
So this would have been a part of the Chapter 91 application that would have been given to the building commissioner. And I happen to think today, again, had I known about this question, the answer is probably right here in Town Hall, because one of the certifications that I'm going to discuss with you is that I believe it's the planning board itself makes a certification that the plans have been filed with the planning board, and I would assume that it's this very plan that I've just submitted to you, namely January of 2011. So the answer to that question of what is it that the building commissioner looked at, and what is it that was part of the public record in this town hall in January of 2011 should be fairly easy to locate. Again, had I known that this was going to be an issue, I would have, that there was a question about what was seen, I would have tried to do that before this evening. But I have Mr. Borselli here, and he and I have talked about this, and this is what was on the original Chapter 91 application. And what in Mr. Ment's submissions, he speculates. He doesn't say that Mr. Gore, the then building commissioner, didn't have the information. He speculates as to whether or not he did, and I would suggest to you that this is pretty good evidence that he had a clear story as to what happened. Now, in addition to that, as a part of the public record, Mr. Borselli was very explicit about what had transpired with respect to the construction out on the site. He submitted a letter on January the 18th, 2011 to the Department of Environmental Protection with the Chapter 91 license, and he copied the Conservation Commission on it. And in that letter, he explains exactly what transpired on the site. I'll just read you a portion of it. He says, the cross-section on sheet 3 of the license plan shows the location of the proposed sheet pile bulkhead and the as-built location of the proposed sheet pile bulkhead in relation to the existing stone concrete retaining wall. The contractor adjusted the location of the sheet pile bulkhead from the permitted location to the constructed location because the subsurface toe stones of the existing stone concrete retaining wall were in conflict with the proposed sheet piling location. He then goes on to say that it was adjusted 10 inches from the location. He talks about how Mr. Devaney contacted the Conservation Commission, Ms. McKay, and he copies on this letter Ms. McKay with a copy of this letter. And I have a stamped copy that went into the Conservation Commission with this explanation. In addition to that, when Mr. Borselli filed for the certificate of compliance with the Conservation Commission, in his transmittal letter, again, copy from the conservation files, he again explicates very clearly that there was a change in the construction of the field by 10 inches over what was approved in the original conservation filing, and this also was in the conservation files, and I have copies to submit to the board. And this again is all in the same time frame, January of 2011, that these very explicit disclosures are being made here to the town of Falmouth. So I'll submit I have copies of the letter that went to the DEP that was copied to conservation.
You can just give them all to the clerk and she'll stamp them and distribute them to the board members.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just take one copy for my loyal opposition.
Is that copy coming?
That's my guess. Thank you. So the point is that Mr. Borselli, representing at that time the Mallets, was very explicit, very clear, and his plans were very clear about what had transpired on the site. Now, as I pointed out in my appeal document, and this is really the crux of my contention here, is that the DEP regulations, 310 CMR 9.34, and I quoted it, and I won't bother to read it again, I'll summarize it, provide that as a precondition to the DEP issuing a Chapter 91 license, the applicant must obtain for them a certification from the building department, from the building commissioner or the zoning enforcement officer, that the proposed project is in compliance with zoning. It's explicit in their regulations. And there's nothing in the regulations that I could find that addresses or authorizes the revocation or the rescission or the modification of any such certification. It's required as a precondition to the issuance of the Chapter 91 license and the filing of the Chapter 91 application. And the application, which is printed up by and prepared by DEP, has the certification in it that is to be signed by the appropriate municipal clerk or appropriate municipal official, and again appended to my filing, but I think this is worthy of emphasis. The certification that was made by the building commissioner at that time, on January 14, 2011, the day after that draft plan is dated, January 13, 2011, is I hereby certify that the project described above and more fully detailed in the applicant's waterways license application and plans is not in violation of local zoning ordinances and bylaws. So the building department at that time, the building commissioner, certifies to the DEP that there are no zoning violations, that the project is in compliance with zoning, that no further relief is required. And in addition to that, there is a certification by the planning department, I believe, signed by a Joyce White, who is identified as office assistant, but it states that I certify that the project described above and more fully detailed in the applicant's waterways license application and plans have been submitted by the applicant to the municipal planning board. So all of this is a matter of record here in the town hall. The application is a matter of record. one official has certified, the most important one, the building commissioner, that there are no zoning violations. This application is then filed. DEP, by its own regulations, relies upon that certification, and then proceeds with the issuance of the Chapter 91 license. And the reason that the DEP would require a certification from the local authorities is they don't want to be in the situation that we're in tonight, which is that they authorize a structure, in this case in Commonwealth Tidelands, which I'm going to address shortly, and then you have a conflict with the local zoning enforcement official, who later on is going to come along and say, well, that never should have been built, now I want it taken down. And if you read the order that was issued by the building commissioner, you can see that one of the things that he's saying is that if you want to take it down, you're going to have to apply for permits for that. In other words, if we don't do what he's ordering us to do, namely apply for a special permit and so on, we're going to have to remove that wall, and that's going to create the exact type of conflict and mess, frankly, that the DEP regulations are intended to avoid. And I've submitted here that I can find nothing that authorizes the town, the municipality, to later on say, well, we now find that there is a zoning violation and we're now going to order you to get relief after we have now certified to the Department of Environmental Protection that there were no violations. And in the opposition, at least so far that I've seen, the argument seems to have been not that there is authority to do that under the DEP regulations or under any statute, but that rather they're questioning whether or not the building commissioner had the full picture when he made that certification. And I submit to you, and I think we've got good evidence that he did, and that he was fully aware of what had transpired there. Now, I wasn't there in 2009 or 2010 or 11 when all of this transpired, but my understanding is that the policy then was that in the event of a repair as opposed to new construction, that the building commissioner then interpreted the applicable bylaw that's at issue here, that was not necessary to then proceed, and that might have been the basis for his certification. This is the information that I've gleaned from both Mr. Borselli and from another engineer that I've spoken with. But regardless of what the motivation was, the certification has to be made. And what I submit very simply is that you can't now backtrack on that. There's no authority to backtrack on that. You have a state agency that's relied on it. Now, my clients parenthetically relied on it. It wasn't really a certification given to them necessarily, but they did rely on it. Now, the opposition says that, well, they didn't rely on it because the wall was already built. Well, they did rely on it because once they filed for the application, the abutter to the north, Mr. Strakish, initiated a very lengthy appeal, and you can see that the permit wasn't issued, the Chapter 91 license didn't get issued until 2013. There was nearly a 2-year battle, and I've got the full file in my office from that battle that was given to me by the lawyer that handled it. It's a file box full of pre-filed testimony and live testimony, whatever else. It was a very extensive, expensive proceeding that was engaged in before the DEP that my clients invested in and that the Millettes invested in, on the basis of having the understanding that there was no further local relief required. Moreover, the property that's at issue, specifically 20 Sheridan Avenue, was owned at the time of the application by the Millette family. My clients purchased it in October of 2011 after the draft DEP license was issued. So they were pretty confident at that time that they were going to get the draft license. They had this certification that there was no further zoning relief required, and they went ahead and they purchased in October of 2011. So there was reliance on this certification, both by the DEP and both by my clients. And so as a starting point, I just submit to you that you cannot, the building commissioner cannot now, 7 years after the fact, withdraw or rescind what was issued back in 2011. And that's really what the effect of his order is. It's tantamount to a rescission of that particular certification. Now, secondly, I've made the argument, and I won't go into it in detail. I've discussed it pretty thoroughly in my submission to you. But the zoning statute requires that if you're going to appeal a decision or an order or decision of the building commissioner, you must do so within 30 days. Now, the statute doesn't say that. Well, it does say it in another section. But the case law provides that once an order or decision is made by the building commissioner, you have a small window of 30 days to make an appeal from that order or decision. And the case law is that if you have notice, actual notice, or constructive notice of a violation, the case law that I've cited in my memo to you, then you have sufficient notice to know that you should be making an appeal of the building commissioner's decision within the appropriate time frame. Now, in this particular case, Mr. Jeffroy, who is a direct abutter, who owns Lot 3, which is directly next door, directly abuts my client's property, 20 Sheridan Avenue, was notified about the original conservation filing. He never appeared in opposition. He was notified of the issuance of the notice of intent. He never appealed it. He stood there. I don't know for a fact that he stood there, but he's right next door. He had a boat there for some period of time. In 2010, while the thing was being built, and he saw it when it was constructed. He received notification of the DEP filing. He never filed any appeal from that. He received, I presume, some notification, I don't know for a fact, but of the issuance of the permit. But in that 2-year period, 2011 to 2013, when this battle was going on, he never interjected or intervened once in all of that. So what changed in all of this? Now, why in 2018 does Mr. Jeffroy now come forward and appeal to the building commissioner? And the reason is that he had attempted, his original filing in 1999 to the Conservation Commission, he attempted to get a dock at his bulkhead. And that was denied, and he had to revise his plan, which I'm going to talk about briefly in a minute, which is where he tore down the existing seawall and replaced it with a new bulkhead. He then, at some point in time, put out a float from his bulkhead next door to my client's property. In 2016, he had a boat on the northerly side of that float, which prevented my clients from tying up to their dock that is lawful and that is permitted, or from tying up to their bulkhead. They asked him to move the boat. He wouldn't do it. And they tried to work with him. He wouldn't do anything with it. They then went to the Conservation Commission to inquire about this float, and it turned out that the float was unlawful. And I appended, it isn't appended to the filing with you, but Mr. Ahmed submitted my response to the building commissioner. In the spring of 2016, the Conservation Commission wrote an enforcement letter to Mr. Jeffroy about the float, and as a result of all of that, he took it out. So now he had no float, and he has no dock. So what does he do then? He puts a cleat on the bulkhead that my clients had constructed in 2010, or that the Mallets had constructed in 2010, and ties his boat there, and does it in such a fashion that my clients could not use the southerly side of their dock. It's only then that he begins to assert that somehow or other this bulkhead, which is permitted by the DEP, is located on his land. And it's only then that he begins to complain about the bulkhead, after he's lost this illegal float. In 2017, he then goes further. He ties his boat not only to the cleat that he put in, but also to the Campion's dock. And in 2017, I filed suit on behalf of the Campions in the Barnstable Superior Court, and we obtained an injunction in the spring of this year enjoining Mr. Jeffroy from tying up to the Campion dock or interfering with the Campion dock. It was shortly after that that they then made this demand for enforcement to the Building Commission. And I pointed that out to the Building Commission, that isn't it interesting that after all this time, and now that an injunction is issued, that suddenly Mr. Jeffroy is complaining and is now seeking zoning enforcement. And I would submit to you, as I have argued in my submission on the notice of appeal, he's simply too late. He's more than too late. He's too late by almost 8 years. And he cannot maintain this at this point. And I think that the answer to him should have been, this town certified in 2011 that this project was in compliance with zoning, was certified to the DEP. You took no action at that time, and under the case law and the statute, you're too late, and your request for enforcement is denied. That's the answer that I believe should have been given to him when he sought that action earlier this year. And I cited a case in response to the building commissioner's letter to me that I did see at the time. There is a case that the building commissioner said to me, look, all the cases you've cited are building permits. They're appeals from building permits. There is a case that I cited, which is an appeal which involved the issuance of a letter, an opinion letter from the building commissioner. And the court ruled that the person did not take any action within 30 days from the issuance of that letter. So it's not just building permits. And if you read the literal language of the statute and you read the literal language of the cases, again, it uses the words orders or decisions. It doesn't say building permits. And so I submit to you that this is all too late. Now, one of the other things that's being argued here is that, Mr. Jeffroy, I had to go in to get a special permit, and you didn't have to get one, and you should be obligated to get one. Well, the work that Mr. Jeffroy did in 1999 was really quantitatively and qualitatively far different from the work that was done by the Mallets. The Mallets engaged in a repair. You go out there today and ripped up that cap, you'd find the seawall in existence out there. The work that Mr. Jeffroy did in 1999 was more than that. It was the tearing down of the seawall, and I have their plan that they submitted to the Conservation Commission. And I also have a copy of their notice of intent, but I'll just read from the plan. It's on file.
Does that apply to this appeal?
Well, it applies in the sense that that's one of the arguments. Well, I'd like to say no, that it doesn't, but it's one of the arguments that they've made in their submissions to the building commissioner. They're saying, look, we had to get this relief, and these people should have to get it too. That's one of the arguments they're making. It wasn't really a basis in the building commissioner's letter, and I just assumed it would be fine with me if you make the determination now that it's an irrelevant issue. And I agree that it is, but I'm only referencing it because it's referenced in the materials that were submitted to you. So I'll cover it very briefly in about 2 paragraphs. According to their plan that was submitted to Conservation, what they did was, it talks about removal of the existing stones and the replacement with a new bulkhead. And if you look at the Chapter 91 licenses, and again, I have them with me, but I'm a little wary of overburdening you with material. But if you look at the Chapter 91 licenses that were issued to Mr. Jeffroy for his work that was done in 1999, the DEP itself characterizes it exactly as what it is, which is to construct and maintain a timber bulkhead and timber piles, whereas our permit is maintain an existing bulkhead, and our original notice of intent is repair an existing bulkhead. Also, if you look at our permit, which is on file with you, which I've submitted, I think it talks about the displacement of our project was 7 cubic yards. The displacement that's shown in the permit, 1999, for Mr. Jeffroy is 19 cubic yards. They also talk about the neighbor, Brian McLaughlin. Again, this is in their materials. They're saying, well, Brian McLaughlin had to get a special permit. Well, Brian McLaughlin did exactly the same thing. If you look at his Chapter 91 license, it says, construct and maintain a timber bulkhead, ramp, floats, and piles to maintain riprap and to dredge. A far more invasive project than what was involved with my client. And again, this displacement in his license was about 120 cubic yards as opposed to the 7 cubic yards that were involved in my client's project. So there's a significant difference in those two things as to why those people would have clearly been required to obtain a special permit in terms of the work that they were doing in the wetlands. And I'll just briefly go over and then try to summarize as quickly as I can for you.
If you could, please.
Okay, the building commissioner is also saying that we need a building permit. And my position on that is that we have a permit, which is issued by Chapter 91. And I've contended, and I think I've cited some materials, that the DEP is the sole and exclusive agent for examining and for issuing permits in Commonwealth tidelands. And I'll leave you with just a couple of final thoughts on this. I don't know how deeply they're going to get into this argument tonight, but one of the things that they're saying is that the bulkhead that was licensed by the Chapter 91 process, that the Millette bulkhead, now the Campion bulkhead, and repair, is located on Mr. Geoffroy's property. I'm not sure that's valid to your determination, but it's one of the things that they're arguing, and one of the reasons that they say that we should be required to go to the Board of Selectmen. And that's a subject that's at issue in the Barnstable Superior Court. It's now a subject in the land court because Mr. Geoffroy has recently filed an action in the land court to determine the jurisdiction in the tidelands. That's all going to be resolved by the courts. You're not the land court, with all due respect. You're the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I don't think that it's really particularly germane to your determination as to where this bulkhead is located. But I will say this. The DEP examines this when you come in for a permit. It's one of the things that they look at. And what they said in the Campion permit, the Millette permit that's appended to my materials, the one they issued in 2013, they identified where this bulkhead is located. And what they identified and what they determined is it's located in Commonwealth tidelands. It's very clearly checked off on their permit. You can't have private ownership in Commonwealth tidelands. Commonwealth tidelands are owned by the Commonwealth. The DEP's made that determination. That's already been made. And if they want to challenge that, they're doing it where they're supposed to do it, which is in the land court. And it's being debated in the Superior Court. So I would submit that that's not really within your purview in terms of what you need to decide here. In summary, what I would like to leave you with is that, the evidence I think is pretty clear that what was filed and submitted to the building commissioner was very explicit in terms of what transpired out on the site, and that he had the full information when he made the certification, that the town is bound by that certification, there's no authority to revoke it or rescind it, and that Mr. Geoffroy had every opportunity in the last 8 years, certainly during the very extended and protracted appeal process that was ensuing, to make his concerns known and to file his appeals, and he didn't do it. And now they're trying to do it 8 years later. And I would ask you to overturn the decision of the building commissioner for the grounds that I've cited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Scott.
I'd like to reserve a right to respond if I may to the
For your information, the building commissioner is here. So in all due respect, he should be the next speaker.
Mr. Palmer, would you like to? Oh, I'm sorry, Kim, did you have any?
If we have questions, should we reserve them for the time being?
It's up to the board. You can either ask Attorney Sabat questions now or allow Mr. Palmer to speak.
I think it might make sense to hear from Mr. Palmer right now.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Rod Palmer, Building Commissioner for the Town of Falmouth. Is there a specific question? There was a lot of information just given. I'm not sure if you have a specific question.
In response to the appeal,
Okay.
he's asking this board to overturn your determination, so you should explain your determination to this board.
The reason for my determination was the original permit that was, or the Chapter 91 license that was filed and subsequently signed by Mr. Gore was for a repair. After Having gone out to the site and reviewed the information that I have, I believe that it was more than a repair. I believe it was a construction, which in my opinion should have had a special permit from the Board of Selectmen.
And how did you arrive at that determination?
Well, based on having gone out there, done a visual inspection, having looking at the overall width of the elevated walkway or dock was larger than what was originally permitted, and just the fact that this dock was not what was originally described in the original permit, the Chapter 91 license. In my opinion, what was constructed was greater than what was originally permitted.
So in your determination, you felt it was basically a new seawall?
I did.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, would have required a special permit through the Board of Selectmen.
So it went beyond the repair?
That's correct.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I'll just ask, so in your experience in terms of the building permit and the necessity of a building permit, could you just speak to that?
Sure, a lot of these are much greater than just a simple dock with a stanchion to the earth. Some of them are, some of them begin 100 feet from the sea, and they start with a patio to a set of stairs to a landing to an eventually a dock. So they, in some cases, transition from a large patio to stairs to a landing to an eventual dock. Some are much smaller. Some are a simple stanchion on the earth, and they go out to a dock. So in some cases, a building permit is applicable. If the structure in its total aggregate is greater than 200 square feet over the earth, requires a building permit. I think you'll find that this one is also greater than 200 square feet over the earth.
So that's not with regard, because it's 200 square feet over earth, then it's not part of the tidelands, which is why, okay.
In your opinion, if this was simply it was new construction rather than simply a repair, how did all the subsequent approvals seem to come through?
I don't know. I can't speak to what Mr. Gore had viewed back in 2010 or 11. So I really can't speak to that.
So the fact that it was done and is completed, if it was completed in error, then you needed a special permit. There's no timing or anything else. You needed a special permit, you didn't get it, and everything else is no.
Yeah, if the intent was to repair and they reconstructed, then I would say yes, they would have needed a special permit.
And so, Rod, you felt that there were certain elements of this whole assembly, certain elements of it that required a building permit?
Yes.
And
yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Sir, do you have a question?
Yeah, so that you believe that they went beyond what the waterways permit was, the Chapter 91 permit, and was there an as-built submitted before sign-off?
I don't think the Chapter 91 license gives the applicant relief from the need for a building permit.
Was there an as-built that Mr. Gore signed off on as to what was constructed?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. If there is, I haven't seen it.
Don't you usually require an as-built?
We don't typically get as-builts on docks. Unlike a foundation permit or a building permit for new structures, we will typically get an as-built to verify its location from its proposed, but on
And
docks we
waterways
don't.
don't require it?
Docks, what's that?
The waterway, the Chapter 91 doesn't require it?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
No. We typically just ask for as-builts for things that are very permanent in nature, such as a foundation. as opposed to a wood structure.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, and this may be for one of the attorneys, but in your opinion, is there a procedure for going back to waterways and saying, this is what one side said, you feel it was not a repair, and ask them to weigh in on whether this was a repair or reconstruction?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
Okay, you would normally do it?
No, it's not something that I typically get involved in.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Yep.
And Attorney Sabat, I do believe that we had some board questions for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I think it would be helpful just to get some answers while this is fresh in my head. So first, I would just note you've submitted, I just want to make sure it was intentional, you submitted a January 18th letter and a January 19th letter. You wanted both of those in?
Yes.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
The point
Okay.
being, they were both copied to the, one's directly to conservation.
Yes.
one's copied.
Okay, great. So I'll just kind of be brief, so I just want to kind of answer, I guess, as direct an answer as you can give me. So is it your contention that the certificate stops the building commissioner from enforcing the zoning bylaw?
My answer is yes, because he is certified to the DEP. He didn't serve, this particular commissioner didn't certify, but the building department is certified to the DEP that there were no zoning violations. And to now say that there were, and that this certification is ineffective, it undermines the whole process that DEP has put into place. And there isn't anything that I can find that addresses the authority of a town to backtrack on its certification, which is effectively, that's what's occurring here. And I just, and I'm not going to argue whether, Mr. Palmer has an opinion that this is more than a repair, and I'm not going to argue that point, whether it is or it isn't. That's a matter of opinion, and I certainly respect his abilities and his opinion, and I'm not going to try to play building commissioner, but my answer to that is, and I'm not being flippant, is it doesn't really matter at this point if you accept my argument that the certification binds the town of Falmouth. The building commissioner at that time, it doesn't matter who the building commissioner was, or that he's changed, or that it's different, made a determination that this was a lawful process, that this repair was lawful. Whether you say it's a repair, or new construction, or it's expanded repair, he made a determination that it was lawful. And he certified that to a state agency that has jurisdiction over structures in the tidelands. So I don't see how the town can now rescind that, which is effectively what this order does.
So, okay, so let me ask you a question, because I'm aware of case law that says town is not stopped under any circumstance from enforcing its zoning bylaw,
Well, I don't know if
right?
it's-
So is there anything similar that you could point to, a certification? Are there any cases discussing a certification where there's been a similar issue? I would think it would be difficult to find. Is there anything else where you have reliance upon another agency where the courts have said, all of a sudden the town can't enforce its bylaw?
No, I think this is a unique situation. I don't think this has ever occurred before, that at least occurred to the point where there's been a case on it. The circumstances you're talking about would be where a building commissioner has issued a permit or made a decision, and an individual property owner has relied upon it, and the town is not stopped from enforcing its bylaws or its regulations. That's not the case here. The case here is that the Department of Environmental Protection has relied upon it and requires it as a precondition for proceeding. That's the difference here. Very different from the other cases that you're referring to.
Okay, I have a couple other questions. So is it your position that no zoning violation exists, or that they just can't go back on the certification?
I think that if there, well, obviously, if something changed, if something changed since the certification, if they added on to this thing, or whatever it may be, let's say they built a tool shed on top of the bulkhead, then clearly, yes, it's a new circumstance. The building commissioner has a right in the world to issue a cease and desist and make them tear it down.
As it exists today, is it your position that there are no zoning violations out there, or because they made the certification, the town can't now go back?
Well, it would be my position, yeah, I would say that there are no zoning violations there, and I rely on the original determination by the building department that there were none. And then secondly, I would say that yes, the certification in these circumstances, not to an individual property owner, but to the Department of Environmental Protection, does now bind the town. And as I said earlier, I believe that the correct decision here, and obviously I respectfully disagree with the building commissioner, the correct decision would have been, this town is certified that there were no violations. That determination was made by this department, and there are no grounds upon which I can now rescind or revoke or vacate that earlier certification. Now, if you had a situation where, that somehow Mr. Gore was duped or misled in some way, that's a whole different case. I wouldn't be standing here if I thought those were the circumstances. But there's no evidence of that. So I suggest to you that yes, that is my position. That in these circumstances, where the town's certified to a state agency with a regulation on it, you're bound by it.
Okay, so just from my personal perspective, I would like to see any kind of case law that you could supply on that to the best of your ability. Same thing with certification constitutes an order or decision under 40A section 815. And then you referenced also a case, appeal from an opinion letter. That would be helpful to see too if it hasn't already been.
I cited it. I'll be happy to provide you with a copy of it.
And then just the other question, you referenced the fact that there was an injunction issued in Barnstable Superior Court. Is that, and I don't want to get into the merits of that case, I don't even know what the case is about. But
I don't think you should.
Yeah, but you're saying, you're kind of saying this is what the motivating factor is, or
Right.
one of them. Is it a preliminary injunction or a permanent injunction?
Preliminary.
It is, okay. So that case is still ongoing?
Correct.
Okay. All right, those are my questions.
I just have a question as well. When building commissioners make decisions, generally the building commissioner who's employed by the town at that time will stand by his decision. But building commissioners change. And let me give you an example. Let's say that a prior building inspector makes a determination that a particular lot in town is a buildable lot based on the information given to him at the time. He puts it in a file. The lot remains unbuilt upon, goes up for sale. Somebody comes in and is requesting a building permit. The building commissioner now that's in the town's employ opens it up and looks at it and says, yeah, I don't agree with this. He's not bound to agree with the prior building commissioner's opinion. I just want to put out there that you're not bound by any building commissioner's prior decision. And who cares if it's a state agency? That means nothing. I'm just saying, he made a determination that there was no zoning violation. A new building commissioner comes along and says, yeah, I don't agree.
Well, I'd even go further with you, and I would say that even if the current building commissioner, I'm the building commissioner in 2009, and in 2018, I say, gee, I think I was wrong in that letter that I issued in 2009. I think I have the right to then say, if I'm within the appropriate time frame, I've made a mistake and I'm going to change my opinion here. But I can see that I respect your position. You apparently have expressed that the fact that it's a state agency is a little concern. I don't like the state either.
He didn't say that.
I know you did say
it was.
I don't, but I'll say it. I don't like the state, but I think that there is a structure that's in place, and I'm not going to belabor it, but that I think is what makes this different. It isn't just that someone is saying, I've changed my mind, or there's a difference here.
Not just to stop, what about the purchase of a lot? Somebody goes ahead 10 years ago on the building commissioner's opinion, they move ahead with the purchase, a new guy looks at it and says, this is garbage. I'm not giving you a building permit, I don't like what it says here. I mean, that's a determination after the fact made by a new building commissioner.
Right, and I don't disagree with that. And I think in terms of the property owner, and even though those results may be onerous and sometimes tragic, I agree with you. You know, it happens.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can say, well, you know, your predecessor said 7 years ago. But again, I don't want to be a dead horse. You know what my position is. I just think it's a different
mistake.
It's a different circumstance, and what you have here again is that, and consider this if you would, to weigh this. What I said a moment ago. If you had evidence here that the original certification was given improperly because of misinformation that was provided, whether it was an accident or on purpose, doesn't matter. It was given incorrect information, and that was the certification. The basis is totally wrong. We're in a different environment altogether. We don't have that evidence. We have evidence to the contrary. That it's clear that Mr. Gore knew exactly what the story was. It's in the plans, and so I submit, and I said it before, that this is a much different circumstance. Because you've got another permit that relies on this certification to issue. And this is exactly the situation that scheme, that regulatory scheme is trying to avoid, where you've got somebody that is going to, even the same building commission, going to change his mind 6 years later and say, oh, I was wrong, and that dock needed to have a special permit, that dock violates zoning. Because where are we then?
I mean, it does happen. You know, it does happen, but it's unfortunate. I mean, you've done a nice job. It's a nice argument.
Well, thank you for that.
I have one question. Essentially what you're saying, relying more on some federal discharge permits, that the issuance of a permit by DEP is a shield against further prosecution by anybody lacking misinformation or dishonesty or anything else by the person you're doing. In other words, if an honest mistake was made, everybody missed it, that's a shield against going back and saying something's needed.
No. I'm saying that even if an honest mistake had been made, you know, let's say that this bulkhead had been built out 30 inches and not 10 inches, and it was honestly mismeasured, and this board is satisfied that there was no intentional misleading. And there was a mistake that was made, and you can show me that the certification was mistaken, then you might have a basis of saying, okay, well, the whole thing is just invalid. But where you don't have that, I don't think that you can now unwind it. That's what I'm saying to you. And I'm not thoroughly familiar with it, but I think there are processes, there is a process in the DEP. A butter has a right to appeal the issuance of a Chapter 91 license. He probably has a right to complain to the DEP after the fact and seek enforcement through the DEP. So there are mechanisms for that. The door's not closed. The question is, though, can the town now create a conflict that the whole process is designed to avoid?
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question for the engineer, just happens to be here.
Sure.
Mr. Verselli, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mr. Verselli is the one who did the plans in 2011, I believe they are, 2010? I know you do a lot of Chapter 91 applications because they come before me sometimes. Is there an as-built prior to an end result of the building commissioner signing off to DEP on that form that comes to him?
The form that he usually is reviewing is prior to the structure being built. In this very unique situation, the structure had been installed. So when we went to meet with Mr. Gore to get the certification that no zoning violations existed, the structure that we're not talking about having an as-built for was in fact built, so we had an as-built. We provided the Chapter 91 plan was in fact the as-built plan. So it existed as an as-built because it was already in the ground and built. So he was very much aware of that.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, Ray?
So, oh, it's only, okay, go ahead.
I don't know if the board's going to entertain anything on the Superior Court case or the Land Court case tonight. That attorney is present. I see Mr. Palmer. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, it is.
So I think the board needs to make that determination and explain that before you get into it about the appeal of the building commissioner's determination, or if you're going to hear everything. This
Mr.
evening.
Hurry, there's no
This
intent to
e-
discuss
excuse
those
me,
cases.
This evening.
We're only here to discuss the pending appeal.
Right, so I understand the Superior and Land Court matters are, they're in essentially private party matters.
That's correct. That's correct. The only intention of my presentation here today are to address the specific issues which you need to determine, specifically whether or not a building and special permit was required and whether or not the enforcement order was time-barred.
Okay.
Any information submitted is relative to that.
That's
case
correct.
Specifically, thank you.
Specifically to this appeal.
It is, it is. And I do have some submissions, before I get into my argument, I do have some submissions. I know that you've already been overloaded with a bunch of documentation. These are exhibits which I'll refer to during my presentation. I know this isn't something that's favored. I'm doing this for the purposes of the record, just to make things clear and hopefully easier for you all through my presentation. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to present those now.
Could I inquire as to how long the presentation is?
It's not going to be as long as Attorney Savitt's. I can promise
How long
you that.
approximately?
15, 20.
Thank you. Do you have enough bits in your computer?
One for each.
Perfect.
No, I can just take it.
I just want to count.
Yeah, this will be easy. Blow right through this.
Just like that did.
Jackson Parmenter, attorney. I believe he'll explain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you just write on there that Attorney Palmer submitted this month? So I have it in the record.
And I will get you a full set. I have a copy of.
Because Audit's been
Oh, here we go.
bringing in
It's my old set.
things as well.
Here you go. Before getting into my argument, which I believe is relatively simplistic, and I won't go through the factual history as I had intended, I think Attorney Savitt did a decent job of that, but there was much talk at the end here about whether or not the building commissioner was misled or duped relative to this Chapter 91 license application. Mr. McGrath is here with me today to demonstrate that that is exactly what happened during this process. Specifically, what happened during the Chapter 91 application process is that the Campions submitted to DEP an application saying they were going to repair the existing bulkhead. And that repair involved sheathing directly in front of their existing seawall. We all know that's not what happened, right? We know that there was a field change, something else happened, something much greater happened than was originally contemplated. And in fact, what was ultimately submitted to DEM, the as-built, are not even an accurate reflection of what was actually constructed on the site. And if you could briefly present that for us, Mr. McGrath.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered professional land surveyor and a registered professional engineer. And what I would like to present to the Board of Appeals is an exhibit plan with an overlay on it To give you some background, my firm actually did an instrument survey of the parcel that was, that is the subject of the appeal, and since I think it's appropriate, I give you a copy of my 2000 plan. The reason that's appropriate is that shows that the seawall is vertical, and it shows that there are existing stones on the bottom. I also brought in copies of plans since it was brought up that the two abutting parcels had permits. I'm going to give you copies of the plans that show the abutting land of Jeffroy and the abutting land of Brian McLaughlin. If you look at the cross sections, you'll see that the base of the stone walls continually, there was a layer of stones. So from the very beginning, you cannot drive plastic sheathing through stones. So they did go through and get a field change. As I told you, if you look at the plan, I've conducted an instrument survey of the parcel. And so I prepared an exhibit plan, and I'll hand you a copy of the exhibit. I have more copies if you want them.
No, I just need to make sure they're marked that you submitted them at the hearing. Normally, if you give them to us at the office, we write it in. That's why it's important to have things before the meeting.
I'm sorry. I'm giving you a copy of the recorded license for the parcel. What I did was I took the, I'm sorry, yeah.
This is for us too?
Yes.
That's an overlay, it goes over one of them.
So what I did was I took there's a plan in the recorded portion of license plan recorded in page book 64879, and that is the plan that is identical to the, well, let's put it this way, it was on the license plan that would have been shown to the building commissioner. So now what I've done, I've put them on by taping them together.
Good luck.
How are you going to fold those?
What I did was, remember, I did an instrument survey. I'm a professional land surveyor. And if you look at the plan I did in 2000 of the site, and you look at it, the property line is the vertical seawall, and that's consistent with the recorded plans. So I took the overlay, I very carefully made sure it was the same scale, and when I overlaid it, and if you overlay it, it's already overlaid for you, you're going to find that the projection into Falmouth Inner Harbor, or that arm of Falmouth Inner Harbor, is much greater than what was described. In fact, if you look at it in plan view, there's a very significant projection that's approximately 4 feet. It's been represented in his plan, it's only 11 inches and it's much greater. If you look at the plans that I drew, the seawall is vertical. There are photographs that have been submitted. The former seawall was vertical. And now on the plan that is accompanying the draft license plan that was given you, the seawall is shown with a back. So the bottom line is that it would seem to me that the plan that was represented shows the historic wall to be over 2 feet into the harbor, approximately 2 feet plus or minus. And it was not. So what we have here is we actually have a circumstance where the plan, by some happenstance, does not represent what actually happened. And so, as far as the extent into Falmouth and Harbor. So, I believe that the building inspector could have been very easily misled. And I think that in my line of work, any filling of the salt water is almost unheard of. And here, it's 4 feet, not what's been represented, it's much smaller than that. So, I'm a registered professional land surveyor. I'm also a registered professional engineer. And so, the other thing I would like to point out to you is that when the original plan was filed with the Conservation Commission for this site, actually shows the seawall to be vertical. So something's happened.
I'm sorry, Michael, it shows the seawall what?
It shows the seawall to be vertical. That's a plan I obtained from the Falmouth Conservation Commission. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. McGrath, you said that the seawall was vertical. I believe testimony from the appellate said that it actually came into Falmouth Harbor. Is that correct?
There is an actually photograph attached to one of the complaints, and it shows that the seawall is and was vertical.
Yeah. So you're
The
maintaining
representation on the chapter 91 is not correct. It was a vertical seawall.
Thank you. Any other questions for the question, Mr. Chairman?
In your opinion, is there an avenue to go back to DEP and both of you, both sides, and say, this is what we think happened, for them to reconsider after the fact? It's after the fact.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't.
You've never done it then?
I've never gone back on chapter 91 to modify it except in a positive way. Meaning we've added something.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. McGrath, just one question. So on the 2000 plan, where you see the vertical seawall, it shows going out from that existing stones. Are those the toe stones?
Well, I don't know what he described as toe stones. There were stones on the bottom. My survey crew felt them. And that's why we know they were stones.
So when
and we showed them in all the others.
Yeah, so when they're represented on the plan, what are they representing, just stones that appear, or are they represented as a part of the wall?
We show them to be independent.
Even though that they abut the wall?
We show them as independent.
So the property line was the old stone wall? The property line was the old stone wall?
Yes.
Okay.
I could give you a recorded plan to show.
Yeah, and the as-built provided for us in 2018 depicts an encroachment into Falmouth Harbor, for lack of a better term. Or maybe it's the right term. Yeah, into the tide, whatever you guys call it, but was there a further encroachment into Falmouth Harbor due to this repair or a new wall? Clearly, right?
There's no question that the seawall itself is further into Falmouth than Harbor.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rath.
I have a question, sorry.
Sure.
So, sorry, I apologize. So, I'm just trying to process this all. So, Mr. McGrath, they say, okay, projects 10 more inches or whatever it is. You say, no, it's actually a 4-foot projection, right?
I'm going by on the license plan
Yeah.
that I gave you, and I didn't keep a copy. It shows the distance of 11 inches. And in my opinion, it's much greater.
So then does that, but a portion of that is still over the property, the land, right? A portion of that structure is still over the land. It's not as if this structure is built wholly over the water.
There's no question, there's a walkway on top, and the walkway is on top of land.
Okay.
And that the ultimate location of the outer bulkhead extended further into the harbor, thereby extending the walkway further into the harbor.
Okay. I'm just wondering, in light of what Mr. Palmer said about, you know, the building permit issuing, if there's more than 200 square feet over the earth.
Well, once they filled it, it's earth.
Yeah, okay.
There's a series of photographs were attached to one of the attorney's submissions, and you clearly see they filled it.
It's filled, correct.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have the plans in front of me. Are you both saying that what plan is correct that went to, for the Chapter 91 license? Is it the same plan you referred to?
The plans are not correct. They went to the-
They're totally different is what they're
Completely
saying,
different.
Jerry.
Oh, I know, but I thought you said what was submitted. So that what the applicant submitted is different from what you're claiming should have been submitted.
Correct. And
Okay, that
it
makes
is
sense.
completely different from what was certified as being in compliance with local zoning. Right. So again, I apologize. My name is Jackson Parmenter, and I represent Vincent Jeffroy, who owns a property abutting the property that is at issue here today. And I'll try to be brief with you. I know it's late, and I apologize again for my lengthy submissions, but hopefully that will mean that I can be brief up here with you all. Really, there are two key issues here, as I think you now know, and those two key issues are were the Campions required to obtain a special permit and a building permit from the town of Falmouth, and secondarily, is the enforcement order now barred? And we heard a lot about these issues from Attorney Sabat here, his claiming that, one, there was no requirement that they obtain either a building permit or a special permit by virtue of the fact that they obtained a Chapter 91 license. And that is patently false. And we know that's false for two reasons. The first reason being the language that is contained within the application itself. And I'd like to go to that application, which is Exhibit J to the package of materials. I'm sorry, it's actually in the license, and it's on page 3. It's section 7, where it says this waterway license is granted subject to all applicable federal, state, county, and municipal laws, ordinances, and regulations, including not limited to a valid final order of conditions issued pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act. So we know, based on the actual license itself, that local zoning still exists and cannot be avoided and is not trumped by the issuance of this license. And the case law mirrors that language. The case law, which I've cited to you in my memo, makes it very clear that a Chapter 91 license does not equal a building permit. That is what the Campions are arguing. In those cases, the strongest of which is Willis versus Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals, says in no uncertain terms, a Chapter 91 license does not equate to a building permit. Simply not the case. Other cases go on to expound upon that principle. Farland versus Conservation Commission of Barnstable, there the court considered whether it was appropriate for both a town and the DEP through a Chapter 91 to regulate the construction of piers. Court noted that the pier regulations require a local permit in addition to the state requirement that applicants obtain a state permit. So quite clearly, as you probably already know, state agencies and local regulatory authorities work hand in hand in regulating these types of things where there is a cross-section of regulation, an overlapping of regulation. It's necessary and it's done all the time. So that being the Chapter 91 license, does not preclude unilaterally or trump the requirement that they should otherwise have obtained a building permit and a special permit from the Board of Selectmen. Their next argument is that the work performed was merely a repair. So it doesn't require a building permit, doesn't require a special permit. Let's start first with the special permit. Falmouth Bylaws, section 240-78. That states any person wishing to perform or cause to be performed any of the following acts or operations shall first obtain a special permit from the Board of Selectmen. And it's quite clear what types of activities require this permit. And I'd like to go straight to subsection B, where it says the filling, excavating, diking, bulkheading, or riprapping within any part of any swamp or tidal marsh, or in or along the shore of any pond, bay, harbor, or tidal river, so as to alter the shoreline of said swamp, marsh, or body of water. That is exactly what was done here. Mr. McGrath has made it clear that they went over and above what was submitted to DEM. I say DEM because I'm from Rhode Island, excuse me, DEP. But even if they hadn't done that, even if they had just gone to where they said they went by way of their application to DEP, they were still bulkheading, filling behind the bulkhead. They were altering the shoreline of Falmouth Inner Harbor, thereby necessitating a special permit. That much is clear. With respect to the building permit, I believe Mr. Palmer did a good job of articulating why this particular structure requires a building permit, and I'll leave it at that to save time. The next argument, and this one again, even though it seems to be an issue that isn't easily, I don't know, researched I guess is the word, because there isn't a lot of research on this particular topic. But the claim by the Campions is that this certification obtained by the building commissioner, albeit on false information, as we now know, submitted to the building commissioner, is somehow a decision similar to a permit from which my client should have filed an appeal within 30 days. Essentially what he's saying is that by the time the building commissioner executed that certification, saying that they were in compliance with the bylaws, in compliance with zoning, the 30-day period to appeal that ran. He may also be saying, he alluded to, some sort of a constructive notice argument. Well, maybe after the fact, when we realized that this application was submitted, well then at that point we should have appealed. Fact of the matter is, this isn't a decision. And there's a case, Richardson v. Zoning Board of Appeals of Framingham, which I recently found, which seemed to be the closest case on point to determining or at least explaining what is a decision and what is not a decision. I think it's so common sense that there isn't a lot of case law out there on the topic. We often run into that problem where you breach a contract or something that is so simple you have the hardest time reaching it because it is such a common sense issue. And in that case, what happened was they determined that there was an endorsement on a plan, and I believe it was an endorsement on a plan by a building official. They attempted to appeal that. And what the court said was, no, an endorsement, that's not a decision. It's not a decision until you get to the point where a permit's issued. So I think that the certification here is much more akin to some sort of an endorsement, albeit one based on information that is inaccurate. But it's much more akin to an endorsement rather than a full-blown decision by which the 30-day period begins to toll. So again, I think that case is helpful, and I think it might be helpful in exploring this issue further. But again, that seems to be one of the few cases that is actually on point here, and again, probably because it is something that is very commonsensical and something that I think you know it when you see it, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. The case is cited by my brother in support of the position that a decision should be appealed within 30 days, which he's saying is analogous to this certification. None of those decisions are applicable here. We have the Gallivan case. We have the Richardson case. We have the Paul Miles case. Every single one of those cases has either a building permit that's been validly issued or a written decision, all of which have been properly noticed to the aggrieved parties. None of that has happened here. We don't have a valid building permit. We all know that. That's undisputed. We have not gotten notice because there is no building permit. These cases cannot possibly stand for the proposition that a certification on a DEM application, which we wouldn't even have notice of for months, if not years after the application is certified, because again, it's just an application, is a basis for starting the tolling of the statute of limitations for 30 days. It can't possibly be the case. So, how do we determine the statute of limitations here? My brother says that it should be Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 8 to Section 15. That delineates the 30 days from a decision or order. Again, not what we have here. What do we have here is the situation contemplated under Massachusetts General Law, Section 7, and under that section it says structures which have been constructed without a building permit, as this structure has been, and we all know now that this structure did need one, there is a 10-year statute of limitations to bring an enforcement order. We are well within that 10-year statute of limitations here, and therefore the building commissioner is well within his right, because no building permit was ever issued, and it should have been, to proceed with this enforcement order. And for that reason, I believe that this appeal should be denied, and the enforcement order from the building commissioner should stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Parmenter. I believe we do have some board questions if you stay up there.
Sure.
Okay, so I just have 2 questions for you. So you argue 48 Section 7. And I think that there's kind of a recent trend in cases that recognize latches. So you know, we know, or based on what's been put before us tonight, or what opposing counsel stated, that your client was using this, I'll call it a dock, but was using this pier, has known about it, and now, you know, years later is saying, well, there's an issue here. And so I just wonder if latches would come into play at all, or what you would say to that.
It's actually, interestingly, and it's a great question, it's the last section of my memo, which actually addresses latches. And the heading on that section is that neither latches nor estoppel is a defense to an action to enforce a municipality's bylaws or zoning ordinances. And
By a private party.
What's that?
By a private party is what you're saying.
I'm
I
saying,
mean, because you're representing a private property owner.
correct, and I think, and it's a weird situation, right? Because a lot of what the case law deals with is an appeal. I'm not appealing. We've brought to the attention that this violation exists. An enforcement order subsequently issues. So latches in this situation would really apply to the building commissioner's enforcement order, in which he's perfectly within the 10-year statute of limitations to do so. And so would we be by bringing it to the attention of the building commissioner.
Okay. All right, and then just one other question. So you say, I think you said, you know, it can't be the law because they just applied for this Chapter 91 license. I don't want to, I'll paraphrase, I'm not, you know, intending to quote you, but you said, you know, there's no notice provided when there's an application for a license. But how is that different from any building permit?
Well, I think I guess to your notice point, maybe that's irrelevant. I guess it would be more the decision piece of this. Because you're right, and I don't know Massachusetts zoning all that well, because I understand it in Rhode Island, you don't get notice of a building permit. I'm not sure how, is that all works here? Okay, so, and you would be on, but I assume that's recorded somewhere that's public record. That's not what happens here with an application. This application could be signed, and it could be held for 30 days until it's submitted to DEP, excuse me. And additionally, one other point regarding the application is that there's a certification in this application by the applicant which says, I certify the information contained in this application is entirely correct. I'm paraphrasing, but it's in there and you can find it. And that is the basis upon which the building commissioner is saying, okay, it's a repair, these are the plans, I'll certify it.
Any other questions from the board? Sorry, any questions?
I do. I know Ms. Phelan brought up latches because there's been nothing stated from Mr. Joffrey or anybody else until now. And it's obviously a very visual thing, and they live there, so they've seen it, and they've seen it for years. Why didn't he ask a determination shortly after this was completed?
As to what.
Why didn't he ask a
compliance.
determination of the building commissioner as to why he certified something that he believed not to be appropriate?
We'll answer that
And
too.
needed a building permit?
Sure.
So why did none of the abutters approach before now?
Sure, and I'll answer that in two ways. One, he didn't realize that that was in fact the case until this litigation had transpired. Secondarily, he didn't have an obligation to do so. He didn't have an obligation to do so so long as he did it within the 10-year statute of limitations, because no building permit ever issued here.
So he had no obligation until the time frame was almost up, is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that he necessarily had no obligation until it was up, I'm just saying that the statute of limitations relative to
I
bringing...
understand the statute of limitations, I'm just wondering why he didn't do this previously, why he let so many years go by.
Well, I think he believed that it was in conformance. He had no reason to believe that this structure was not properly permitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So, if you don't have any questions, we have obviously got a little bit of reading. Are some of those case laws in here?
They are.
One I'm very familiar with,
Are you?
but the other ones, they are in here. So obviously the board would like to continue this.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, sorry, just to jump in, I do think it would be helpful to have, if Attorney Scott, anything about the certification binds the town. Just trying to think through analogous situations, maybe a billboard. I know when there's a digital billboard, you have to certify to the state the status of the zoning. I mean, there's going to be analogous circumstances, I would think, where the state relies upon a municipal certification, and what's the
Well, the
outcome of
circumstances
that?
we have to find, in a case, would be a circumstance where a municipality effectively revokes or rescinds or reverses itself after certifying to a state agency. So I can see if I can find.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think it would be helpful if there was some case law discussing what's the certification? What is, just generally, what does it do for the state in relying upon that? I think that might be helpful as well.
I'll try to find it. I will.
I
See if I can
understand.
come up with something, but I can think if you look at if you think it through, that is the obvious rationale, and you look at the regulation, that's the obvious rationale, is the DEP doesn't want to be issuing permits where they're going to get into exactly the situation we're in now. Something that they've approved is not going to have to be torn down.
Yeah, just in cases, I would, if it's possible.
And I'm not going to argue on the merits because it's late, and I know you're going to continue, but and obviously, I can't respond, and Mr. Borselli can't respond to any of this. We haven't seen, there was a 2000 plan submitted to you, exhibit plan, overlay plan, none of this was provided to me. So obviously, we'd like to have copies of those. I didn't get copies of a lot of the things that have been submitted. Secondly, I would like to say this, to suggest that I made a statement that was patently false, and he refers to the interpretation of the Chapter 91 license, I think is a bit of a stretch. We may disagree about the interpretation of the Chapter 91 license. We may disagree about the interpretation of statutes. But to stand here and say that I made a patently false statement to this board, I think is really a stretch and uncalled for. And thirdly, one of the items that you have does address the question of latches by private parties in terms of the 30-day issue. And it's the case of another Richardson case, Richardson versus Board of Appeals of Chilmark. And it's in the submission that I gave to Mr. Palmer, which Mr. Ahmed has filed with you. And I'll provide you with a copy of that when I provide you with a copy of the case. You can take a look at that. So, so it's different. It's the same circumstance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, does the board want to look at October 18th or November 1st? I'll remind the board, November 1st is very close to a date that you're quite aware of.
That's true.
And I may not have time.
October 18th.
October 18th is not going to be a good night for me.
How close is it to that date?
I retire November 9th. Somebody's got to be able to
November
track this.
1st?
November 1st is all right.
Again, it's very close to
Well-
getting on other applications.
Maybe I'll try to.
I mean, I appreciate the closeness. I think it's a reason maybe the chair should notify the town manager in the Board of Selectmen.
November 1st is fine. They're.
Well, no, I think that's. I
Yeah,
was
they're in
gonna-
search of, Jerry. They're in search
I
of.
know, but this is a concrete example of,
Well,
Is the 11th, I see what's on for the 11th.
no, the 11th is very important to keep, just as that I guaranteed the board it would only be that 40B.
Okay.
Because that's 3 weeks in a row, several hearings. So,
I mean, you know, I love
You
the
can do
job.
November
I love
1st.
the job, but, you know.
Yeah, I think, so I'll make a motion that
I'll do
we
my best.
Application 6118, continue the hearing to November 1st, 2018 at 6:30 here in Town Hall.
Thank you.
And who knows, you may
All
have
right,
finished
that was
it.
made by Kim, is there a second? Second by Jerry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you hear me? Maybe I didn't. All right, we do have one more
We
open
do,
meeting.
we did hop around the agenda a little
Well, I
bit.
think it's on.
We do have an open meeting agenda item.
Oh, you did? Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Still to address. That's item number 2, board administrative review for determination of insubstantial change, 87 Gifford Street. It's application 89-04, comprehensive permit, Falmouth Housing Corporation.
All right, I did send the board the letter by Attorney Moynihan, and we've since received 2 letters of support of the change, one from the Falmouth Service Center and one from the Falmouth Housing Corporation, stating why they believe this change is important. You guys all read it, right?
Yes. I read it.
And here's
Yeah,
the
understood.
plan that is a little bit larger that I asked them for. So this here is the garden area that is currently there, and it is all part of the Falmouth Housing Corporation's property. This is what is going to be subdivided from this parcel in order to create more affordable houses. This is all affordable housing in here by Falmouth Housing Corp. Attorney Moynihan is present, and Linda Clark of Falmouth Housing Corp. If you want to speak with them, the question is this a substantial change or an insubstantial change to the previous comprehensive permit? And obviously, Attorney Moynihan is asking that it be insubstantial. The other, that 40B down below for 587 to be known as 591 once it is subdivided. Will be before the board on October 11th.
Do you have an opinion?
So your determination is, if it's insubstantial, they automatically go forward and can do a subdivision plan that this board will sign off on at the time of the future hearing. Or if you deem it to be substantial, it will require a modification before this board, hopefully October 11th, before the other 40B. Thank you. So it's your determination.
I can jump on.
If you
I mean,
want to
based on the
start,
review
Judge.
of everything, I was initially concerned whether the garden was part of the initial 40B. And I was led to believe that it is not.
The garden is under the auspices of Falmouth Housing Corporation. They had an agreement with Falmouth Housing, with the Falmouth Service Center. That agreement no longer exists. Falmouth Service Center submitted a letter of support of the subdivision for the promotion and construction of 20 additional affordable units.
I think having said, I think it's insignificant because they'll be back before us anyways for the additional construction for the 40B.
So I have a question just based off of what was just said. So this lot 5 was part of the lot
Yes.
that the comprehensive permit relates to, right?
Yes. And there's financial reasons why it has to be subdivided in order to create 20 more additional
that will be a part of this by Falmouth Housing Corp.
So, in my opinion, I think anytime that you're changing a property like this that's subject to a permit and taking some out, over an acre out, I think it is substantial. Having said that, I think it's approvable once we get there. I just think it, from my perspective, it would be substantial.
I mean, I've never seen an instance where, in the aggregate, you've got a 40B development, and then somebody wants to come in and pull an acre out of it and have that not be substantial. At the end of the day, they're coming back to the board anyway for the additional affordable housing. But I would say it's, we're not talking about removing 2 trees. I think it's probably substantial. We're carving out over an acre of land off of an existing, previously approved comprehensive permit. How is it not substantial?
Well, what their feeling is, and they can speak to it, they're here, that this is all part of Falmouth Housing Corp. Falmouth Housing Corp owns the property. This, do you want to have Attorney Moynihan speak to this?
And let me just go a step further. She can certainly speak if she'd like. But just to go a step further, I don't know. I don't even know. Okay, let's say the board determines that it's substantial, and they come back to the board. I don't know what's substantial about it, other than that it's you're removing an acre of land.
The determination for substantial and insubstantial is listed in the 760 CMRs 56.0512 or something like that, I believe, 04. So, Jerry, the board has to request that.
I
so
understand that.
I'm trying to answer Paul's.
And I was trying to expedite the next step.
Well, it's up to the board. She is here if you want her to speak, or if you've made your determination that it's substantial.
I'd like her to speak.
Bob, how do you feel?
I'd like to hear the Attorney Moynihan.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Attorney Moynihan, if you could address that point, please.
Yes, thank you. So, first of all, the reason why this is important is because there is a grant program in place. We're trying to fast track the housing that you'll hear on October 11th in order to be eligible for the state funding. Between now and October 11th, having you make a determination that this is insubstantial would help the process a great deal, because that would allow us then to go to the lenders who have mortgage financing on the existing site and have them modify their mortgages, subordinate their mortgages to the new financing. So that's part of what happens outside of the hearing room, but it's very critical in terms of the timing. So as far as the insubstantial test goes, when you look at the regulations, it says that the board shall determine whether it deems the change substantial or insubstantial with reference to the factors set forth in 760 CMR 56074. Okay, so then you go to those factors, and these are some examples. So the following matters ordinarily will be substantial changes: an increase of more than 10% height of buildings, an increase of more than 10% in the number of housing units, a reduction in the size of the site of more than 10% in excess of any decrease in the number of housing units proposed, a change in building type, a change from rental to home ownership. Those are typically what the regulations say are considered substantial. Insubstantial changes, examples are a reduction in the number of housing units, that could be an insubstantial change, a decrease of less than 10% in floor area of units, change in the number of bedrooms within the individual units, change in color or style of materials, a change in the financing program. So those are examples. So here, I understand your concern about taking out an acre. But you have to look at the size of this site. It's a 12.4 acre site. It's a very large site. The density of the existing density of the housing is 3.21 units per acre. That's very low for affordable housing, particularly what you see now being approved even up to 20 units per acre. So very low density, very low lot coverage. The existing lot coverage for structures is 3.21%, okay? So the proposed, with this acre coming out, proposed density is 3.21 units per acre. The existing is 2.9, excuse me. So we're talking about very slight variations in density, and in the lot coverage, the proposed lot coverage goes up to 3.55% from 3.21% by structures. So those are the factors that I would say I would ask the board to focus on in whether or not this is substantial or insubstantial. Not that it's an acre of land coming up. You know, let's look at it in terms of the impacts on the residents and the impacts on the project site. And we're saying because of the size of this property at 12.4 acres, taking 1 acre out is really insubstantial. It's not really affecting lot coverage, it's not affecting density, and we're still well under the state zone 2, recommended 4 bedrooms for 10,000 square feet in this zone. So all of those things, if somebody came to you with this 11.4 acre site today and asked for 36 dwelling units, you'd be saying, wow, this is great. You know? So that's why we're saying it's insubstantial. And it would help the process. We certainly, understand if you feel you want to go to a full public hearing, but in these projects, that does create less certainty for the applicant in the process of moving forward, and it's difficult, makes it a little more difficult in terms of the process. So it would be a great help here. So anyway, that's the other thing is that the garden area. If the board, I think, was going to look at this as substantial at all, it might be because this garden area was anticipated that it would be used for the tenants. And, that might be something where the board would say, well, gee, taking the garden area out, that might be substantial. But that's why we provided the letter from Linda Clark saying that the tenants really never had any interest in using the garden area. It was never used by the tenants. The service center took it on as kind of an informal thing. They've had no objection to giving it up, and they've indicated that in their letter and has supported the project. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Monahan.
Thank you.
I feel differently now. Yeah, I think it's a distinction without a difference, because at the end of the day, I think you're just gonna cluster it with more housing, and, it's a nice organization, and you guys promote affordable housing, and I've changed my mind, so I think it's insubstantial.
I tend to agree with Kim. I do believe it is substantial. But that having been said, any opinion of us, I think the attorneys understand, the board understands, Suri does as well. When it comes to judging something substantial or insubstantial, just for the public to know, it's not an endorsement or rejection of any future plan proposed for that site. We're not judging any plan or proposal on the merits tonight. It merely means a modification of a special permit.
Comprehensive permit.
Comprehensive permit, I'm sorry, Suri, thank you. It's got a little late.
I know.
Modification of a comprehensive permit that's already been issued by this board, so that's all that means if we do find it substantial.
Why, I guess, based, if the articulation of the definition of substantial was accurate, which I think it is, this doesn't seem to come close to the fact that it's substantial. I mean, I understand process-wise, possibly the need for public hearing, and who knows what information may come out of the public hearing. And I think one of the members said it's probably approvable. I just don't think, based on I think it's a statute, that we should declare this substantial. I think it's not a precedent that, someone's going to come back and say, oh, you removed an acre. There's plenty of fact patterns here of why this should be considered insignificant, not substantial.
think some
Is
board
there-
members just might have to agree to disagree.
Oh, no,
That's all right.
Is there a vote? Because we're getting there.
Yeah, we should
We
call.
have to adjourn it.
Well, I understand what she's doing with the comparisons, but I just, I think it might still be substantial.
And I think the location plays a part. I think Attorney Moynihan, I think you did a wonderful job explaining why it's not. But I think the location in the front of the site, in front of the buildings, I think we just say, or in my opinion, say it's substantial, or I think it's substantial. Come before us, we, get that other permit modified.
This has to be done before the other.
Right, and then on the same night. and-
Okay. Is there a vote?
Do we have a potential, I know it's just
Is
clarification.
there a vote first?
I have a question first, okay? It's up to the chairman whether he wants to answer my question, allow me to ask the question. How soon could we hear this?
I stated that earlier. It'll be October 11th, the
I-
same night
I
as the
did-
comprehensive
Same
permit,
as the other one.
but before, because you can't weigh in on the comprehensive permit until this is
I missed
approved.
that.
Well, you could, I guess.
So I will make a motion that we find this substantial
So
change.
anyone wish to second that?
I might not
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, that's made by Kim and second by Bob. All those in favor of finding this a substantial change?
care. Aye.
Aye. 3. Opposed?
Aye.
2.
That carries, right?
That
That's
carries. It's substantial.
That carries.
That's a majority.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Moynihan.
Sri, you have a copy of this for the file, right? Just real quick. Because I'm going to take this one. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put mine in there.
Thank you.
I believe I did with table procedural rules and policies.
Oh,
Shall
God,
we
one day I'll
continue to
do
table
that,
that?
yeah.
Okay, that's tabled and we are adjourned.